are live.
Thank you, and welcome to the Committee of the Whole Community Development. The meeting is now called to order. Since this is the first meeting we're having since the passing of Walter Gretzky, I'd like to make a few comments about that. Walter has often described Brantford as being the center of the universe, and as such, Walter was the center of Brantford. So you might have felt the universe wobble on its axis slightly on Thursday evening if you were awake at the right time. In being the center, a lot of things flow outwards from the center. And with Walter, that was certainly true because he flowed out with warmth, generosity, and goodwill every day of his life. Walter was a man who couldn't say no. He could not say no to charities such as the Canadian Institute for the Blind, the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and many other charities. He was honorary chairman for a lot of committees, and he'll be remembered for a lot of that. He also could not say no to providing autographs, and he refused to leave the arena or wherever he was if there was a lineup of people waiting for autographs. He would stay until the last autograph was signed. He was always very warm and generous that way. Unfortunately, COVID prevented us from having a full meeting when we renamed the Northridge Golf Course the Walter Gretzky Municipal Golf Course and Learning Center. It would have been nice to have a very large crowd there to show him how much we appreciate him. But I know as someone who was unable to attend because of the COVID, I was there in spirit, and I'm sure all members of council and many, many members of the community were as well. So with that, I'd like to share the condolences of our council. So I'm sure I speak for everyone on council, and in fact, just about everyone in the community, if not everyone. So we offer our condolences to the family, and your loss is shared with the community. Obviously, your loss is greater than ours, but Brantford has lost the Lord Mayor. We've lost a great coach. The charities have lost one of their best spokesmen ever, and the world has lost the best hockey dad in the world. It's been said that everyone has a Walter story. Love and memory of Walter will live on with each retelling of those stories. So with that, I'll ask everyone to rise for the invocation. As we come together today, we recognize the great responsibilities laid upon us. Our council will always strive to understand the needs of the people we serve and to use our power wisely and well. Our purpose is to establish and maintain a city of prosperity and righteousness where freedom prevails and where justice rules. Let us also not forget those who served our community and who are no longer with us so that we may continue to do the work we must in their memory. Thank you. Be seated. Now, if the clerk could call the roll, please.
Councillor Sless?
Present.
Councillor Utley?
Present.
Councillor Wall?
Present.
Councillor Van Tilborg?
Present.
Councillor Carpenter?
Here.
Councillor Vanderstelt?
Here.
Councillor McCreary?
Here.
Mayor Davis?
Present.
And Councillor Martin.
Here. Thank you. I'd just like to remind the committee and our viewing public of a few procedural rules for our virtual meetings in operating as efficiently as possible. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for committee members shall be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the video meeting should the need to answer questions of members arise. Any member of committee should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raised hand button on the bottom of their screen. Clerk staff will lower the hand when you have been recognized by the chair for your speaking opportunity. In the event a connection service interruption occurs that affects quorum of the committee of the whole, we may recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of committee participating via online video conference will vote using eScribe, and the clerk will announce the vote results. Members of the public who registered as delegates or under the statutory public hearings are able to take part electronically via webcam or via telephone for the meetings. All rules for delegations under the city's procedural bylaw continue to apply. Now, are there any members that have any declarations of conflict of interest?
Mr. Chair, yes, I have a conflict of interest relating to both 5.2 and 5.3 as I own property which is immediately adjacent to the proposed developments.
Thank you. Are there any other conflicts of interest? Okay, seeing none. At this time, I'll ask members of the committee what items they would like to separate for discussion purposes. Are there any items to be separated? Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you want me to move the two resolutions I have now?
Once we finish with separations, we'll deal with it then.
Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Chair Martin. 7.1.1, please, sir. Thank you.
Are there any other separations? Okay. Councillor Wall, can you please move the motion to approve all items for consideration and consent? 7172 not separated for discussion purposes.
So moved. Seeking a seconder.
Second by
Councillor Van
Councillor
Tilburg.
Van Tilburg. Thank you. We'll now call the vote on all items not separated for discussion. Can the clerk please read the items that we'll be voting on and then call the vote?
Certainly. The items before you with the motion are 7.1.2 single source procurement of the 2021-2022 corporate insurance policy, 731 honoraria and expenses report for 2020, and 732 minutes. Mayor Davis, I am just waiting on your vote to register, or if you'd like to give a verbal. Thank you. All items not separated for discussion purposes carries on a recorded vote of 8-1. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vandersteldt, Sless Martin, Wall, Utley, McCreary, and Van Tilburg.
Thank you. Councillor Sless, now would be the appropriate time for you to move your referral.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it's moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Utley, that items 5.2 and 5.3 be referred back to the applicant to provide for further consultation with residents. And if I could speak very briefly to that, Mr. Chair, in the last couple of days, there have been a number of concerns raised, both on social media and both directly to Councillor Utley and myself. And I believe there's an opportunity for the applicant to have conversations with the folks that do have concerns. There have been a number of public meetings regarding these two applications, but I think further consultations required to fully vet the process and vet the concerns that these folks have. So he says he can do it within a cycle. We'll leave that up to him. As soon as it's ready, it'll be coming back.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions, comments on the referral? Seeing none, if staff could call the question, please.
Councillor Carpenter, I'm just waiting for your vote. So the motion to refer applications 5.2 and 5.3 is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vandersteldt, Sless Martin, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, and Utley, noting Councillor McCreary's conflict of interest.
Thank you. So anyone who was here for hearings for 5.2 and 5.3, they've been put off till next month. And with that, I'll turn the chair over to Mayor Davis for the other hearing.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. And I'd really like to thank you for you and Councillor Sless and Councillor Utley for making my job just a little bit easier tonight. So tonight then, we previously were going to have 3, but we have now just 1 public hearing on tonight's agenda. And public meetings are held in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act. The purpose of the meetings are to discuss the planning application, to hear from the public either in support of or in opposition to the application that is before us. At the end of each public meeting, the committee will pass a recommendation on, which is generally considered for a final decision at the next meeting of council. The name of everyone who speaks in regard to any item tonight will appear within the meeting minutes. Anyone wishing notice of any further proceedings regarding the application should also provide their name and address and contact information to the clerk's office. The procedure we follow is that the applicant speaks first. Members are allowed to ask questions, followed by municipal staff with questions from members. And then the applicant has an opportunity at the end to provide clarification and respect to any questions or issues that are raised during the meeting. And as I indicated previously, we just have 1 item for tonight, and statutory public hearing. It's item 5.1, an application for zoning bylaw amendment PZ 1620. The draft plan of subdivision 2920-501 and draft plan of condominium 29 CD. Re 575, 538 Colburn Street, known as the old Canadian Tire property. So I believe we have the applicant. I'm going to ask the applicant to appear before the committee. And if you please state your name and then present your application, followed by questions from the committee members.
Hi, good evening, councillors, mayor. My name is Marcus Gagliardi, and I'm here with on behalf of Cascade Developments. And I just want to, does everybody see the presentation screens?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great. So I actually just want to apologize to council before I get started, because this is ultimately a plan that's been before council previously back in January of 2020 and was previously approved for a zoning bylaw amendment as well as official plan amendment, which is why I've titled the presentation Colburn Street 2.0. We saw the opportunity to take a good plan and make it even better. So if we could jump to the next slide. So I'll just take you through a very brief outline of the applications that we're applying for today, and then walk you through some of the nuances of the old plan and the plan that's before you now, some of the zoning that's required to implement the new plan, and then take you through some of the elevations and renderings that have actually been on the first slide and this slide as well. Next slide, please. So the applications that are before you today are, 2 of them are administrative in nature. One of them is a draft plan of subdivision. The other is a draft plan of condominium. The draft plan of subdivision is ultimately being used to create 3 blocks from where there was a previously 1 giant block. What we've done now is separated the 2 mid-rise buildings that were previously approved from the low-rise portion of the site. And what that will allow us to do is on the low-rise portion of the site, develop the site for freehold townhouses or parcels of tied land, pottles as we like to call them, in the future build out of the site. The draft plan of condominium is ultimately before you to establish the boundaries of the condominium as was always contemplated even in the original plan. And then obviously the rezoning that's before you is to implement some of the changes that we've sought out to the original plan that we believe to make the plan even better, safer, and healthier for the community. So if we can jump to the next slide. So this slide here shows you an idea of the draft plan of subdivision that's before you. Block 1 in the top left corner of your screen would be the first mid-rise building. That's a 5-story building. Block 2 is the low-rise portion of the site, which will consist of townhouses and live-work units. And then block 3 is the second mid-rise building, which was also approved during the previous zoning application back in January 2020. So all we've done is separate the land uses by creating these blocks. Next slide, please. This is the draft plan of condominium. Again, just outlining the boundaries of what will be private and what will be freehold. So if the roadways, the sidewalks, the central park area will all be under condominium jurisdiction. So they'll be under private maintenance and under the private condominium board. And the other areas that have been carved out will ultimately be further subdivided through part lot control to create freehold townhouse units. Next slide, please. So this is the old site plan that was previously before you back in January 2020 and ultimately approved through the amending bylaw. And you'll see the two top corners, the right and the left, are the mid-rise buildings. Those aren't really subject to this application. Those are staying as they are. What we've done is in this plan was we had stacked townhouse units, which are shown in kind of the army green color, and back-to-back townhouses, which are shown in the brown, and then the live-work townhouses, which have a commercial ground floor with residential units above, which are shown in gray at the top of the plan. Now, in total, there was approximately 158 low-rise units. There was a central park area, which is running down the center of the plan. If you want to jump to the next plan, I'll get right into what we saw to be improvements. So with this plan, what the opportunity that we saw was the stacked townhouse units that we had previously proposed, ultimately had a ground floor level that was more of an apartment, and then a townhouse unit that was above it. And we saw an opportunity to create more family-friendly or family-oriented units and provide a mixture of townhouse units within the same plan. So what we've done is we've created an opportunity for 3 or 4 different types of townhouse product. We still have the live-work units, which are shown in purple. We've actually been able to add a couple of units, which will add to the commercial frontage along that main street and give it that real main street appeal. The rear lane units that are along Iroquois ultimately remain the same. Those are shown in yellow on the left of your screen. The orange units are the back-to-back units, which we previously had on the original plan. But instead of having stacked townhouse units now, we've gotten rid of all of them and gone with these back-to-back units, which are 2 and 3 bedroom units, much more oriented towards families and younger families. And then we've also been able to create traditional townhouses on the back part of the plan, which you see in the turquoise, which are your typical townhouses. They have rear yards, backyards. So you really have a mixture of every single type of townhouse unit that we could propose. And in addition to that, we've also maintained the central park area, which is shown in green on the center of your screen. And instead of it being kind of a long vertical shape, we saw the opportunity to move it into a horizontal shape and have more of the houses looking at the park. And we felt that was actually a great feature to have from a safety and health perspective, just so that if people are in the park, there's always a set of eyes on the park. You're going to have less opportunity for any crime in the long run, any mischief. And ultimately, we've maintained the exact size that it was in the original plan. In addition to that, we've also reoriented some of the streets. We've eliminated all of the dead ends in the plan. So that's a bonus from a fire safety perspective and emergency. And it also is a better plan for waste management and maintenance of the condominium. So we saw that as a benefit as well. Next slide, please. This is just an image of our landscape plan, again, featuring that central park amenity area. It's the same size that it was before, but also highlights some of the rear yards that we've created for those townhouses on the back part of the plan. They'll have a typical backyard and have space for their own amenity. And the back-to-back units and the rear lane townhouses will all have the amenity areas that were previously approved on the previous bylaw. So they'll have their balconies over top of their garages to use for their barbecues or their couches or their chairs, in addition to the amenity area in the central of the plan. Next slide, please. So the zoning that we require for the, I'll call it the new plan, is very minor in nature. The park space that I just showed on the previous plan was originally shown on the zoning schedule to our approved bylaw as being in a vertical shape. And in discussions with staff, they said, because we've shown it on the schedule, so we ultimately need a little bit of a variance to change the shape of the plan. So that's part of the amendment to the bylaw, but ultimately the size of the park will remain the same at 1,200 square meters. Through working with staff, there was a minor reduction required along Iroquois, where we originally had a 4.5 meter setback where the rear lane townhouses are. We've since reduced that to 3 meters, but again, those are for rear lane townhouses. There's no driveways that are going to be on Iroquois, so it'll be a very active streetscape, very much in keeping with the official plan policies and the direction of this plan always intended to take. The reductions along the western property line are a centimeter, so there's not much to talk about there. It's very minor. We still meet all the parking requirements that were originally proposed and approved back in January. We meet all the amenity area requirements that were proposed and approved in January. And in addition to some of the minor variations that we're proposing, we're also proposing new standards that will be implemented for the actual individual poddles or lots that we're going to be creating through future part lot control applications. So ourselves and staff saw it as a good opportunity to do that now and save ourselves another trip to the committee or the council at a later date. So that's being done as a housekeeping amendment today. Next slide, please. I just wanted to walk you through some of the renderings that we've put together for the community. This one here is taken as a southern shot. This would be ultimately from Colborne Street looking south towards the roundabout, and you can see both sides of the Main Street frontages. You've got live work units on both sides, commercial at grade, lots of landscaping, and really a pedestrian-oriented environment. Next slide, please. This shot here would be taken from the amenity area itself, looking south towards some of the townhouse units that again will be looking directly onto the park, creating a very safe environment, lots of eyes on the park, and vice versa. Next slide, please. This shot is taken from the south side of the private road, looking towards the central amenity area and then further on to the roundabout, just to give an idea of what would be in the center of the amenity area. A nice area for congregation, for residents to get together and chat. Hopefully, once all this COVID stuff is behind us, great place to take a walk, bring the kids, and get some fresh air. Next slide, please. This shot here is taken from the west side of Iroquois, looking east towards the Iroquois frontage. So again, this is where you have that relationship with the street and the street frontage. You've got no driveways on Iroquois, just the front doors and windows, creating a very, very friendly environment for the street, eliminating any appearance of cars from Iroquois. Again, these houses will have their parking in the back. And if you jump to the next slide, I'll show you exactly what I mean. So this would be the back side of those units. Everybody will have their own driveway, their own garage. And the appearance of cars is really mitigated from the Iroquois Street frontage. Next slide, please. This is an up-close shot of the live work units. Again, commercial frontages at grade. The residential unit would be above the commercial ground floor. You've got commercial parking out front for the commercial owners or visitors. And if you jump to the next slide, this is the little entry feature that we have just coming in from Colborne Street. Some of the commercial frontages again, great pedestrian environment, walkable, and really an accessory for the community, the community that we're proposing, but also for people that will be hopefully visiting the area as well. Next slide, please. And this would be the backside of those live work units. So you have a commercial frontage along the main street, and then in the back, it's very much a residential townhouse where people would have their own driveways, their own garage. They've got their own amenity area above the garage. Very much looks like your typical townhouse. So we've achieved two things with one stone in this regard. Next slide, please. So that's it for me. If any of the councilors have any questions or staff, happy to answer them. But ultimately, we're very excited about this development. We feel like the plan is, and we feel like it was a good plan originally back in January, but we feel like we had an opportunity to make a good plan better, and we took that opportunity upon ourselves, and are hoping that you see it the same way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus. We do have a couple of councillors who would like to ask you some questions, starting with Councillor Van Tilburg.
Oh, Marcus, as you know, I've been very impressed by what you have done with this piece of property. It's just kind of got every kind of facet of residential and a bit of commercial in there that I could think of, and done in a way that really has put the property to great use. When I'm looking at the park changes, what inspired you to make those park changes, and how did you manage to focus on the safety aspect? And if you could explain to the public that are watching what the difference was before, and you've mentioned what it is now, but how that was affected by the way the buildings and the shape of the park was created.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councillor Van Tilburg, for the question. And if I can ask staff to bring up the slide that had the old plan, if that's possible.
We're just finding here for you.
Thank you. There we go. Great. So this is the older plan, and I just, ultimately what we had kind of created was, or what we originally thought was to have this central park area, which was good, but what it had was, if you look at these units that are siding onto the park, none of them are actually facing the park, and what we had created was this kind of tunnel feature where you didn't really have a lot of eyes looking at the park. The units to the south of the park would be able to see it, but these units siding onto it were kind of creating a bit of a corridor. So we thought it would be a good opportunity to just change the orientation of the park. So if we jump to the new plan, which is the next slide, I believe, where it has the same size, but now you've got blocks on either side of it. But then you've got, 1, 2, or 3 blocks that are looking directly onto the park, in addition to the units to the north that will also have a viewpoint of that park. So it's created this really safe environment that kind of all eyes are on the park, as opposed to being this kind of tunnel feature that we had created. We thought that would be a great spot, or a great place to make it a lot safer for the community in the long run. And I think it ultimately, because it takes on a different shape now, it actually will allow us to program that park a little better as well.
Yeah, so I would like to just thank you for doing that. I mean, I liked the concept of the park to begin with. I didn't see the shortfalls that you did. And you've done that a lot with this project. So I just want to thank you for what you've put into it. I'm very pleased with it. And So I'm glad you're, to come back with revisions that make it better, versus you're trying to accommodate questions from the community that have come at you. There was no questions put forward to you. You've just chosen to make these changes to make the community that you're building better. Is that kind of correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Councillor. And actually, in order to do it, we actually reduced the number of units in the community from 158 low-rise units down to 150. Now, we reduced some of the stacked townhouse units that I was talking about before, but what you have now is 150 family-oriented townhouse units, which I think will make for a great community. So we decided to reduce the density a bit, but come back with a better oriented park, a better oriented road network, and ultimately a community that will just, in our opinion, flow a lot better.
And I don't know if this is the place to ask, but what's the availability of units to purchase on your development?
I wish I could honestly say there was any units left. We are, I believe, 98% sold out. I can provide a bit of stats for the councillors as well. I believe 36 or 37% of the purchasers were from Brantford, with another 30% coming from other municipalities just outside of Brantford, like Stony Creek, Hamilton, Burlington, and other neighboring municipalities. So you've definitely attracted some of the people that were not in Brantford to come to Brantford, as well as maintained a large portion of that for people that were already in Brantford and maybe looking to make a switch. So we were happy with that as well. And from our sales program, it was good to see a lot of families coming out to purchase units. Definitely not a speculator or renter sales program. So these are definitely the end users, and we think that'll fare well for the community in the long run.
Well, thank you very much, Marcus. I'll give the other councillors a chance to ask their question.
Thank you very much.
Great. Next, Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Gagliardi, I hope I pronounced that right. First, I want to thank you for your excellent presentation on a site that's been a long time coming. And I'm sure the Ward 5 councillors are just frothing at the mouth with this project to start. A couple of questions for you. Who maintains the overall site?
Thank you, Councillor Utley. And yes, you did pronounce it right. Actually, it was a great. Thank you. Thank you. The draft plan of condominium application that we have in front of you as well is establishing the boundaries of where the condominium will be. Ultimately, maintenance of the roads, maintenance of the sidewalks, maintenance of that central park area will ultimately be undertaken by the condo corporation. So cutting of the grass, any snow removal. I think the only thing that we're trying to work with staff on, and I believe we're in a position to obtain municipal waste collection, because now we've eliminated some of those dead ends from the roads. So municipal waste trucks will be able to get in and out comfortably. But everything else aside from waste, I think will be under the condominium jurisdiction.
Okay, and you touched on my next question, which was garbage. Will that be curbside, or will there be centralized garbage bins?
So we're still working through some of the details with staff through our site plan process, but in our last round of comments, I believe we've provided everything that we need to in terms of space curbside. So that would be curbside collection with a municipal waste vehicle.
And one last thing, Mr. Chair, is they're the best visuals I think I've ever seen. They were very realistic, especially the shading and the summer scenes. Obviously, it'll look pretty different in winter, but I wanted to commend you on the professionalism of your presentation. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wall.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Marcus, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Incredible presentation. I think many people in Ward 5 and the city as a whole are very excited about this project. I honestly don't think that there is a 48-hour period that goes by that site isn't mentioned somewhere on Facebook. So I can't wait. I'm so excited about what you guys are doing there. I also wanted to thank you and your team for your caliber and level of communication. It's great. Communication makes the world go round. I don't think we'd be where we are today without the great communication, and I just think that it bears mentioning. So I had a couple questions. Some of these I may have asked when you were here the very first time, so forgive me for repeating myself, but I want that information out there. On the eastern edge of the site, there is this giant wall. You may have noticed it. I was wondering how you're incorporating that into the site in any capacity.
Yeah, it's a great, thank you for the warm welcome. And again, I apologize for being back in front of you, but again, we saw the opportunity to make the plan better and we took it. The eastern part of the site, you're absolutely right, has the retaining wall that retains the RioCan site and the No Frills Plaza. What we've done is our landscape plan is pretty dense in the sense that we've provided a landscape strip, and that's actually in our zoning bylaw as well, and staff might speak to it a little later on, but we have a planting strip, and the plan is to plant as many trees and bushes as possible along that wall, and really hide it from the internal community. Instead of seeing gray bricks, they'll see greenery and trees. That's really been our plan all along. Was, originally, I think back in January, we discussed potentially doing some public art on the wall. Unfortunately, it's not under our ownership. So the best thing that we can do is provide as much landscaping as possible, ensure the landscape grows, and make it a very green community for the residents that are looking out onto it.
Excellent. Okay, next question. The commercial units on your site, you had mentioned being very successful in the residential sales of the project. I was wondering, one, if you could comment on what the sales are like for the commercial aspect or the leases of that, and then additional to that fact, what is your plan to ensure that they're not just sitting there vacant?
So it's a great question, and when I said 98%, I was speaking about the whole site. So those units have actually been sold as well. So some of the people that have bought those units are small business owners themselves and plan to have their business operate on the ground floor and then live above the unit, which is what the units were intended to be. They're not designed to be separately leased out. I mean, there is opportunity for that, but these were truly live-work units where, someone wanted to operate, let's say, a small boutique cafe or an espresso shop or coffee shop or a little yoga fitness or fitness studio or gym. They could do that on the ground floor of their home, create that street presence and frontage, and then live above the unit. So that's ultimately what we've received to date. A lot of the people that have purchased them are small business owners and are going to look to make use of those spaces. So I hope that kind of answers the question.
I was not expecting that, and it's a spectacular answer, and I'm excited to hear it. Next question. You mentioned the park numerous times, and I think it's beautiful. I can't wait to stand in that park and look at what's going on around it. Though I did want to ask what because it's right there at the roundabout where people are going to be coming in and driving around, and I was just curious about the safety of having the traffic and the park there in the area. Is there any consideration for that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we did look at, ultimately the roundabout is used as a traffic calming and traffic control measure. So, going into or exiting or entering the roundabout ultimately won't be done at a high speed. So the roundabout itself actually acts as a safety measure for the park as well as the adjacent houses. So we did give that a lot of thought. Our traffic consultant took a look at that as well, and engineering staff, transportation staff at the city have also looked at it as well, I believe. And we're pretty confident that it'll be a very safe environment, given the location of the roundabout and the speed of cars will ultimately be pretty minimal going into and out of that location. So we're pretty happy with that as well.
All right, thank you. Next question, future thinking. I was wondering about electric charging stations for electric vehicles and whether that was something that you were going to have on site, or if from the sale of the unit, if it's something that's been requested or is already considered in the actual units themselves and the apartments?
Yeah, sorry, I thought I was muted. Another good question. The good thing with these units, or all of these units, is that they have their own driveway and they also have their own garage. And I can't speak from the construction side, but I believe all the houses come with 200 amp service. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that is enough power that if someone wanted to have a charging station, or for example, have a Tesla inside their garage, it's enough power to have that charging station and charge their own vehicle right at home. So I believe all the houses will have that capability. So we don't have any charging stations on site per se, but each house and each unit has the ability to do that.
Final question, Mayor Davis, and thank you, Council, for your indulgence here. The site itself, it's a condo. Is it freehold on a condo road, or is the whole site condo?
So it's freehold on a condo road. That was part of the reason for coming back in. The road will ultimately be condo, but the units themselves will be freehold, which we thought was a more desirable form of home ownership for the future residents. It also allowed us to lower some of those condominium fees as well, because they'll be taking on some of the responsibility, like shoveling their own driveway or shoveling the little sidewalk in front of their house. Whereas if it was a full condominium, a lot more responsibility falls onto the property manager or the condominium board. So that was a good solution for us to kind of lower some of the fees, make it more affordable, but also give a more desirable form of home ownership. So yes, it would be freehold on a common element road.
Thank you for answering all my questions, and thank you for your commitment for building a high quality project in our community.
Thank you very much, sir.
Well, hopefully there's still some more questions to be asked. Councillor Vanderstelt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I'd never get the opportunity to ask Marcus some questions. Marcus, thank you for your presentation. This is exciting. I like the way it looks, the way it feels, the way it presents. It's obvious that you have a very vested care and interest in how our community functions and how this fits in with our plans. If Julia, perhaps we could go to Plan 2.0 and just pop that back up on the screen. I've just got one question with regard to one of the things that we've learned in the city with developments like this. There's, as you know, a big wall between everybody that's going to jump into this these condominiums that are already sold. And Marcus, if you're standing in the south lot line of your property and you're looking north and you're walking along that retaining wall, I would argue that there would be an awful lot of foot traffic that would be interested in gaining access at that corner. What people have a tendency to do is find the shortest route. I'm just wondering whether or not you wanted to fit Brantford's plans as being a kind of a walkable city and promote that walkability along that eastern wall to the access point. I know there's a change in elevation there, but whether or not there's any feasible way that you can put a walkway there that would lead to the retail opportunities on the high side of that wall, being all of the retail stores and the grocery store, the schools, Tim Hortons, everything else up in that area. Or would that pinch your plans too much for that 5-story building? Sorry, Marcus, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry, Councilor Vanderstelt. So it's a great question, and if I'm understanding it correctly, I just want to pull up the plan again. So you're ultimately talking about a connection from the low-rise portion of the site, I guess through Building B or the mid-rise portion out onto Colborne Street. And
yeah,
I
just
guess
people have a tendency to pick the shortest route.
Yeah,
so I wasn't sure whether or not that factored into any of your decision-making processes before.
I would say it did, and it has. There is a pretty significant grade there, as you mentioned. So I'm through the development of Building B, when we developed that mid-rise block, which we're currently in some preliminary sketching stages for that block. There may be the opportunity to create an additional connection. For the time being, on the low-rise portion of the site, what we thought was provide as many sidewalks as we can, connecting the community out onto Colborne Street safely. So it's ultimately not the shortest path, but it is a safe path.
Understood. Yeah, gotcha. And you had mentioned that you'd like to hide some of that retaining wall and perhaps some of the graffiti that we're finding on that wall with a healthy tree line. Did you also consider septhead lighting in that area just to ensure that even though it is covered for the residents, the future residents, that lighting is also included into that program so as to avoid some of the things that we wouldn't want to see happening in that area?
So we definitely, we've put together, I guess, with outside of the zoning application, we're working through our site plan process as well with the city towards site plan approval, and we've put together a private street lighting plan that would definitely illuminate that section of development. So while you'll have the trees, fronting up or backing up against the wall, that portion of the development will be very well lit. Meet all the standards. Oops, lost my earphone here. Meet all the standards of the city, but also make it a very safe environment, as you mentioned, so that there isn't any shadows or dark spots on the site. So we're definitely working with staff in that regard through the site plan process.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you, Marcus. And thank you for tracking how many Brantford buyers there were for this project. That's a significant number. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Next, Councillor Sluss.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome, Marcus. Appreciate you coming and doing business in our community. Thank you. The condo corporation, there must be more than one here, is there? How many are there?
Thank you, Councillor Sluss. You're absolutely right. What there will end up being is one condo corporation for the low-rise portion of the site, the townhouses. There will also be a condo corporation for the mid-rise on block 1 or building A, and another condo corporation for building B. And what we established in our condo documents for the townhouse is some shared agreements, so that when those condo corporations do come online, they will also be partaking in some of the maintenance of the roads, the park, etc. So that will happen in time, but there definitely will be 3 condo corporations there maintaining the site.
Okay, yeah, I appreciate that. Your 98% sellout, is that including the low rises or the 5-story buildings as well?
No, that is just for the low-rise portion of the site. We haven't released any of the mid-rise buildings yet. Okay.
And just finally, if I could, the timing of the project. Is it a phased project, or how do you plan on building?
It's a phased project in the sense that we're going to build all the low-rise units first, and then we'll turn our attention to the mid-rise blocks. The mid-rise blocks actually offer us an opportunity for construction staging and soil work as well. So we'll use those for our construction staging. We'll build all of the low-rise portion of the community, the live work, the townhouses, the park space. So all of that will ultimately be built, and then we'll turn our attention over to the mid-rise, so that when those units are built, they already have a park space, and all the infrastructure that they need is already there.
Okay, and I guess just finally, shovel in the ground. When would you anticipate that?
I'm working very closely with staff. I wish I could say it's tomorrow, but we are pushing for April for sure. We want to make the best use of the spring season. So I mean, Joe and his staff have been great. I know I saw Jeff Medeiros' name on here as well, and congratulations to him. I know he just had a baby, so appreciate him jumping on even with all that happening at home. So staff have been great. We're trying to dot our T's, or cross our T's, dot our I's, and get this thing in the ground as quickly as possible.
Terrific. So it looks like there'll be activity there this summer.
Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Marcus. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Hi, Marcus. You can tell we're all very excited about this site being developed. I have a quick question, and I know that you're still in site plan right now. Those renderings were beautiful. They were great. How close to those renderings can we expect the development to look?
Thank you, Councillor Ankowski. To be honest, we render product as a sales mechanism, but also for something that we can show council and show staff. So we stand by those renderings. So we'll try, we're ultimately going to push to try and make the product, the park, and the community itself as close to those renderings, if not better than those renderings for the future. So it's not a gimmick in the sense that we make the renderings look good and then walk away. We're putting our name on those renderings, and we take a lot of pride in that. So the final community will definitely look like the renderings, if not better.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marcus, two things for consideration is one is garbage pickup along the frontage on the commercial units. A pet peeve of mine is the unsightliness of garbage bags and cardboard and so on along main thoroughfares, and it's very unsightly. And I wonder if you could consider doing something with that. I don't expect an answer now. And the second one is, which Councillor Wall alluded to, is speeding cars, and I wonder if speed bumps may be a consideration to get those small but pesky fast drivers to slow down. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
They're two great points, and I've made a note of them, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, Mr. Gagliardi, that's a very thorough questioning, but in a very positive way, because I think you've done something very positive. So thank you very much, but hang around. We may need something further from you after staff have presented.
Thank you, Mr.
All right, so we'll continue then with the remainder of this statutory public hearing. Next up, our municipal staff to speak to the application. And so I'd ask staff to, I believe we have Jeff Medeiros, Joe Mudu, and Nicole Wilmot. I believe probably Jeff here. Yeah, Jeff, congratulations. And you didn't really have to come here with the birth of your child, but speaks to your dedication that you're here. Anyways, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate it. So through Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'm Jeff Medeiros. I'm an intermediate planner with the city. Before us this evening, we have a zoning amendment application, draft plan of subdivision, draft plan of condo for 573, 585 Colburn Street. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try to go through this slideshow as quickly as possible. Marcus did a fantastic job, and I'm already noticing there's some redundancies in what I'm conveying here. So I'll try to kind of just give the high level. But long story short, basically it's a minor zoning amendment. It's to accommodate essentially some design changes to the overall site that Marcus, the agent and applicant, has acknowledged. Subdivision is to create 3 blocks. That's sort of the Coles notes. And with respect to the condominium, it's a common elements condo. And I'll explain that in a little bit more detail as we go into the presentation. Next slide, please. In terms of the site, it's vacant. As Marcus had indicated, council approved an official plan amendment rezoning to go from essentially a commercial zone and land use designation in the official plan to what's being called a mixed commercial residential zone in the zoning bylaw, similarly in the official plan as well. And that approval dates back to January 2020. Next slide, please. In terms of the concept plan that was before council back in January of 2020, that's on the screen right now. Just to kind of give a visual as to what's changed. I'm not going to speak to the specifics. Marcus has already covered that off. Next slide, please. And these are some of the changes that have occurred now. So as Marcus had indicated, townhouse product has been modified. There's rear lane townhouses, traditional townhouses back to back, and mixed use townhouses. Next slide, please. So on the screen before you is the draft plan of subdivision. 3 blocks. Block 1 and 3 are for the apartment buildings, and block 2 is for the townhouses. Next slide, please. This is the draft plan of condominium. It's common elements. I'll explain what that means, but basically through a future process called part lot control, the applicant or the development will carve off what are called parcels of tied land or poddles. And those are going to be tied to a common elements condominium. And as the applicant and agent had indicated previously, the idea behind those poddles is that if you were to buy a unit, you would own essentially what's outside of the unit, not necessarily just within the walls of the unit itself. Next slide, please. So in terms of provincial policy and the local policies, whether being the City of Brantford official plan, proposals consistent with the growth plan provincial policy statement. As I said at the beginning of the presentation, the designation or the current designation of the property is mixed commercial residential area with a modified policy area 52. That's to recognize the apartment buildings. The uses, the apartment building uses and the townhouse uses are permitted in this land use designation. So no amendments are proposed to the official plan. Next slide, please. With respect to zoning, so council approved back in January of 2020, the site-specific mixed commercial residential exception 18 zone. That's not going to change. Staff are recommending that the site-specific exception 18 just be amended. One thing you'll note on the slide is that there's still a holding provision on the zoning. Staff are recommending that that still stay in place, and I'll speak to that a little bit further along in the presentation. Next slide, please. In terms of the proposed amendments, the applicant has already spoke to it, but just to kind of cover off where they're actually located. Exterior side yard along Iroquois Street, just essentially bringing the townhouse block closer to the road. Westerly interior side yard for the traditional townhouse block at the back. There's a Schedule B in the zoning bylaw. What that basically means, it recognizes the previously approved geometry of the central amenity area. That's also being proposed to be modified as part of this zoning amendment application, as well as the removal of a loading space requirement for the mixed-use townhouses. Next slide, please. In terms of poddles and some of the other amendments that are being sought as part of the zoning amendment, this is consistent with what the city has approved in similar townhouse projects, specifically for those that are tied to a common elements condominium. So as you can see from the screen, that's sort of a basic illustration as to what a parcel of tied land is. Just to answer one of the questions from one of the councilors during the session, it's essentially what I'm going to say a freehold lot within a registered draft plan and condominium. So that's just kind of give you an idea. There's 150 of those for each townhouse unit located in this development. In terms of some of the site-specific provisions, so there's poddle regulations. Those really come into effect once the poddles are created, and those are created through part lot control. So once those are registered, the condo's registered, they take on zoning regulations, and that is why they're site-specific requirements for things such as your lot area, your lot width, lot coverage. It's not deviating from what was approved previously. It's really just to recognize each individual unit, whether it be the mixed-use townhouses or some of the traditional townhouse blocks. Next slide, please. Similar to the last slide, the poddle zoning regulations recognize things such as your front yard, your rear yard, and your side yards. There are some specific provisions with respect to the rear and the front yard in terms of some of the setbacks. The intent there is that they are still maintaining the parking requirements. So there's no changes to parking on site. That's was approved previously, and that's still staying in place. It's just these setbacks recognize that you have to still accommodate parking within each individual poddle. So you can see with the 5.6 meter setback to the garages or garage doors. Next slide, please. In terms of development consideration, so I spoke to the holding. There's holding still in zoning. Staff are recommending that stay in place, subject to satisfy the city's requirements with respect to the noise assessment, transportation impact study, which is currently under review, as well as satisfying some of the city's requirements under site plan control, whether it be in the agreement or posting securities. There is an active site plan application. That is really the detailed design. Through that process, staff will be dealing with the noise requirements, the TIS, any engineering, lighting, landscaping. Those are sort of the requirements that get reviewed through that process. Similarly, comments with respect to the transportation, access, servicing, those are normally dealt with through the site plan control process. But there's also draft plan of conditions on the subdivision and condominium, which you can see in the staff report. Those ensure that really the end result here is that this site gets developed comprehensively. And what I mean by that is that it really functions as one site. So right now we have a site plan application for the townhouses. The idea is that down the road, once applications come in for the apartment blocks, those developments are integrated within the overall functionality of the site. And as such, there's condo and subdivision conditions that deal with it as such. Next slide, please. In conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the zoning amendment, subdivision, and condominium applications. They are consistent with the PPS and conform to the growth plan. Staff consider that this development is considered to be compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. And that is it for my presentation. So if there's any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Wall.
Promise I don't have a dozen questions. Thank you, Mayor Davis. I do have 2 or 3. So the first question is just for anybody who might be watching at home, and even for myself. Can you explain the difference between a condo road and a municipal road? And in this particular site, the ownership of the road then is not going to be owned by the municipality. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I think one of the biggest differences you'll see with the condo road is really the size of them. City has municipal standards with respect to the size of a public roadway versus a condo road. So to answer your question, I mean, that's one of the biggest differences, but also in terms of ownership. So there would be a condo corporation that's registered that would be responsible for the maintenance of the condominium road.
So for example, those roads aren't monitored with like a residential speed limit in the same way that, say, Colburn Street is.
Correct.
Okay. And then along with what Councillor Utley had mentioned about the speed bumps, and that wouldn't be something the municipality would do, it would be something the builder or the developer or condo corp would have to do?
That would be correct, but maybe I'll leave that to Gary Peaver, an engineer, who can maybe speak to that a bit better than I can.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Gary Peaver, Manager of Development Engineering. Through the chair to you, Councillor Wall. Yeah, as part of the site plan process, we are looking at different calming measures, traffic calming measures for this internal site. As we see, most of these condo roads still function with some traffic on them, and there's lots of pedestrians walking around. So either way, we are looking at encouraging different uses and different types of traffic calming throughout the site, and the applicant is working with us and trying to provide the detailed designs for that.
Perfect. Okay, and then this final question is a question that I promised I would ask live on the air for anybody who might be watching at home. The infrastructure underground on the site, all the sewer, all the water connections, all of that stuff, who pays for that? Is that paid for by the municipality and the taxpayer, or is that paid for by the person who's building the project?
Through the chair to you, Councillor Wall. All the infrastructure that would be within the private site would be paid for and maintained by the builder, and then ultimately the condo corporation.
What happens after it's all built? Does it get assumed then by the municipality?
Through the chair to yourself, Councillor Wall, no, it stays with the condo corporation. It'd be their responsibility to maintain and service that infrastructure when required.
So there's no cost to the taxpayer for all of the underground infrastructure on that site.
Through the chair to yourself, that sort of correct. Again, it would be part of the condo fees, and it'd be something under the Condominium Act that they would have to have a reserve fund study completed every few years to look at the replacement costs of that infrastructure. But the condo corporation and the residents within that condo board would be the ones paying into that reserve fund.
And that's standard through any development site within the municipality on private property.
Through the chair to you, specifically to condos, the reserves or funds and all that information would be specific to condos, but on any
more specifically to the builder paying for underground infrastructure. I meant.
Through the chair, that is correct.
All right. Thank you very much for the time.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. through you to staff, could you give us an example of where this pothole style development has already occurred in the city?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So there's been a few projects that I've been involved with over the years. One example that comes to mind is 720 Gray Street, which is at the corner of Gray and Garden. There's actually a site that is fully built right now that most of the members of council I think might remember. It was called 77 Diana, which is a townhouse development at the corner of Diana and Blackburn Drive. Through that development too, they have potholes. That one has 172 units, I believe. So we've seen a few of these projects throughout the city.
Okay, 422 power line, would that be similar?
Sorry,
you're not aware of it?
I'm not aware of that one.
Okay. Okay, I think it is, but I'm not sure, so I was just hoping to confirm that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to somebody. When contracted services vehicles enter this roadway, or city vehicles enter this roadway, and something occurs, something happens to the vehicle, there is a spill, we're moving some material and something falls out of the truck onto the roadway. In a situation like that, where we're very well aware of who was doing what at the time that the spill occurred, who is responsible for cleaning up the spill on condo land?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it would be the private landowner, so it would be the condominium corporation in that particular case.
In every case?
If it falls within the realms of like the common elements area, then I would be under the impression it would be them, or it'd be who, perhaps who actually created the spill would be responsible as well. I mean, if it's on private land, I would think that would be the condo corp.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank you.
So that completes staff portion of this public hearing. Now, this is the stage of the public hearing where members of the public would come and either express their opposition or support of the application. And to do so using the virtual format, they would have to register beforehand, and there's a procedure for them bringing them in. However, in this particular application, I suspect no coincidence, there have been no members of the public who registered or indicated that they wish to participate. So that means we go to the final stage of our public hearing in this matter, and that is asking the applicant, Marcus, to come back, and if there are any additional statements of clarification you'd like to provide following the staff presentation and the questions that arose out of that presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No additional questions on my end. I just want to thank staff again, Jeff, Joe, and the rest of their staff on the engineering side as well. They've been excellent to work with through the entire process. Communication has been great, as Councillor Wall mentioned. The communication from staff has been even better. There's a constant flow of communication between us. And I think that's going to make for a great development in the long run. So I thank them for that, and I also thank council and the mayor for the kind words about the renderings and the images. And we look forward to bringing this forward as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thanks again. So we'll now get the resolution on the floor so we can begin to debate it and vote on it. And I believe Councillor Wall, you're prepared to move the item. Would you please state your seconder and then read the motion?
Excellent. So moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Van Tilburg. Okay, 5.3, applications for zoning bylaw amendment, PZ 1020 and draft plan of, nope, that's the wrong one. I apologize. 7.1.1. Nope. Which number is it, Mayor Davis?
5.1.
It's 5.1. It's PZ 1620.
Got it here. Thank you so much. Sorry. Applications for zoning bylaw amendment, PZ 1620 draft plan of subdivision 29T 20501 and draft plan of condominium 29 CD 20505, 573 to 585 Colburn Street, 2021-108. A, that zoning bylaw amendment application PZ 1620 submitted by Cache Developments Brantford Incorporated affecting the lands located at 573, 585 Colburn Street to amend the holding mixed commercial residential exception 18 zone HC3 18 to further modify the location of the proposed central amenity area, reduce the exterior side yard, westerly interior side yard, and the loading space requirements, and to establish site-specific provisions for the parcel of tied land be approved in accordance with the application provisions as noted in section 9.2 of report 2021-108, and B, that draft plan of subdivision application 29T 2501 Cache Developments Brantford Incorporated affecting the lands located at 573, 585 Colburn Street be approved, subject to the conditions included in section 9.4 conditions of draft plan approval of report 2021-108, and C, that draft plan of condominium application 29 CD 2505 submitted by Cache Developments Brantford Inc. affecting lands located at 573 to 585 Colburn Street be approved, subject to the conditions included in section 9.5 conditions of draft plan approval of report 2021-108, and D, that pursuant to section 3418 and 5138 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 CP 13, the following statement shall be included in the notice of the decision. Regard has been had for all written and oral submissions received from the public before the decision was made in relation to the planning matter as discussed in section 8.2 of report 2021-108.
And Councillor Van Tilburg, confirm you're the seconder.
I am the seconder.
Great. All right. So any discussion? Councillor Utley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just want to congratulate the Ward 5 councillors and staff for all the work they put into this. So I'm really pleased for you both. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
I would also like to thank staff for the work they put into this, including the now departed Paul Moore. This property had always been, particularly when Councillor Newman was around, on his radar screen, and the push to jump a bunch of hoops to get that out of some commercial hands and into the direction that it's going today. That's been a lot of work from a lot of people over the years, and honestly, sometimes you just get lucky with the people that purchase the land and they come forward with a proposal that seems to be so satisfying to everybody. And I think you notice what I call a level of care for the community and for what they're building that really stands out. So this is going to be a great help to the 5th Ward, a great help to the community. People that have been looking at that empty property for a very, very long time. Soon we'll be, I may be having a different kind of complaint to deal with, and we'll look forward to that as we see Colburn Street become a much more busier corridor. But this is a really good thing. Families moving in, there's schools nearby, there's a high school nearby, and this is already sold out. And to hear that the percentages significantly still local people buying it, it tells me that a lot of times we hear that somebody can sell a home in Toronto and what have you, and because they're making so much money from that home, they can buy property here in Brantford. And often that raises the prices of property, which puts it out of the hands of locals who obviously don't have that Toronto kind of money. And I mean, right away, I guess the uptake, people were very quick on it, and it seems like a very suitable setup for people who are looking for a home, and that quick sale tells me that. So I mean, it's been a hard one to get out there. I think the first time they did a presentation, we had a snowfall that shut everything down, including the city. So there was always delays, and then the COVID come after that the next year. So it's funny when you're looking at something that's so good and all the things that are overcome to get there. And we seem to be well on our way to getting that shovel in the ground and to seeing something really, really fantastic coming along Colburn Street. So That's my input.
All right, Councillor Wall, you're next.
Thanks, Mayor Davis. I've never known a time in my time in this community that this wasn't an abandoned site. So many people have memories of what was there before, but for me and for many of the people I know, it's only ever been an abandoned parking lot. And I can't believe that we're going to see something different now. I can't wait. Every time for the rest of my life when I drive by that site, I'm going to know that we did this. And I'm so excited for the people who are moving to our community, because if you ask me, and I'm sure if we ask many of you, this is the best community in the world. This is Brantford right here, the center of the universe. I'm so happy for the people who are going to be able to call this site home. I wanted to just express how thankful I am, which is kind of a thing I do, but I'm thankful to the developer for investing in our community. I'm thankful for their team for all the hard work that they've done behind the scenes and now coming soon with the construction and moving people into this community. And a huge shout out to city staff, because you're awesome. And this is an incredible project, and we couldn't do it without our incredible city staff. This is great. So let's vote when everyone has had a chance to talk.
Councillor Carpenter, floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I want to thank Councilor Van Tilburg for recognizing former Councillor Dave Newman, who worked so hard on this site and the other Greyfield sites in the community. And the city's willingness to upzone this property to make it desirable, and for the timing for the community to be developed and to be of interest of everybody. And from the GTHA now, everybody wants a piece of Brantford, it seems to be. This will not only help that site, it will help the fledgling businesses that have been having difficulty along that corridor in the strip plazas on both sides of Coburn Street, who are having very much difficulty. And some of them we've seen some businesses close along that corridor. Now we see a renewed interest. So the people on the street that this will put on the street will help all those businesses do very well, and will fill those commercial sites with new activity. And that new activity will create new tax dollars and new growth, new excitement in the community. So it's a rebirth of the area, is what it really is. And I want to thank everyone's staff for thinking outside the box and making sure this happened. Thank you very much.
Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you very much. Well, this is it's a unique property development plan to the city of Brantford. I don't believe we've seen the like of this before with respect to the live-work units. They're pretty popular to the east of us in places like Burlington, but this is kind of a first for us, probably the first time a live-work unit's been built here since about 1900. And I got to think, regardless of, we often hear from people in the community that this should be a site for affordable housing, but every unit of housing that gets built in this city, regardless of its economic return, regardless of whether it's rented or owned, alleviates somewhat the housing crisis that we currently have. So this moves us forward on that account. The folks that are building this are going to create homes for a number of people. They're also going to enjoy a pretty good profit from this building, which is what these folks are in it for. The side benefit is derived to the community, however. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, if I might say, I particularly am excited about this as well, because for a couple of reasons. One, we know property in southern and southwestern Ontario, it's a limited supply, and we know the government through place to grow legislation is requiring us to make best use of the lands we have. And that means intensification, which means denser. And many times in our community, when you mention that word, people immediately assume the negative. Right? They assume that it won't be consistent with our community, that it'll create, traffic problems and a whole host of problems. But you see something like this with a developer builder that has done, I think, a pretty imaginative job here, creating, I think, what will be a testament to intensification, how you do it right, make really good use of land that already the municipal infrastructure is there to service at no cost to us. And the other thing I like about this is Councillor McCurry kind of touched on. I call it back to the future because, you know, back in the 1900s, in our downtown areas, this is how merchants carried on. They carry on their business down on the ground floor, and then they live above in the apartment. And, you know, our society lost that. And now this is bringing it back. And what's the advantage to that? You know, when you have the owner of a business living above the business, then they're going to take better care of the business. They're going to take better care of the surrounding area. And it's doing that means they care. There's a greater degree of care and attention. And I suspect we're going to see more of this. So great for a lot of different reasons. So with that, I'm going to ask Deputy Clerk, if you please take the vote.
Item 5.1 is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councillors Vanderstelts, Slass Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Mayor Davis.
All right, we've now finished statutory public hearing. This is when I would normally step out and Councillor Martin would take over. But because Councillor Martin is going to be moving the very first resolution, we've decided for convenience sake, I would just stay in the chair. So I didn't seek it. I'm doing it to make it more seamless. So we're now moving into delegations, and we have two delegations who registered for tonight's meeting after the 9 a.m. deadline. And these are delegations regarding item 8.2, the payday loan establishment licensing resolution, and at 192 King George Road, and the 8.01 odor bylaw. So prior to waiving the rules to allow delegations, we must of course consider a motion to waive those rules. And if the motion carries, the committee can then hear the delegation, and we can then proceed. So, but first of all, we have 8.2, the payday loan establishment licensing. And because there wasn't a previous notice of motion, even before we hear the delegation, we need a motion to waive the rules regarding the notice of motion, so it can be heard tonight. And that, of course, will require 2/3 vote to carry. So before we hear delegations, we have to determine if properly this particular matter is going to be before us tonight, and then we can hear from the delegation if that's the case. So, Councillor Martin, let's hear your motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move, seconded by Councillor McCreary, that section 1511(5) of chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived in order to introduce the following resolution without prior notice of motion. Whereas Council at its meeting held February 23rd, 2021, reduced the payday loan establishment licensing availability to 9 annual licenses and removed 190-192 King George Road as an available address. And whereas the current owners of the property, 190-192 King George Road, were not notified in advance of the change of status of their property, and whereas the current owners have a new tenant prepared to lease the space for a payday loan operation, now therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to present to council for consideration an amending bylaw to Municipal Code Chapter 326, Schedule A-14, to 1, provide for a licensing cap of 10 payday loan establishments, and 2, list 190-192 King George Road as an available location for a license to be issued to.
Okay, so again, your seconder is, please?
Councillor McCreary.
Councillor McCreary. All right, and again, this requires a 2/3 vote, which I believe, Julie, that would be what, 7? There's 10 of us here.
Through the chair, yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay, so any discussion on the motion to waive the notice of motion for this particular matter? Not seeing any. Julie, would you please take the vote?
The motion to waive the rules regarding the notice of the item is approved on a recorded vote of 9-1 with the necessary 2/3. Those in favor, Councillors Vandersteldt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Mayor Davis. Those against, Councillor Van Tilburg.
Okay, we still have a procedural motion, and that's because either one or both of the delegations who wish to speak tonight registered after 9 a.m. And of course, we know that requires a motion that must be passed by a 2/3 vote. And I think Councillor Martin, you also have that motion.
I do, thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Carpenter, that section 15-6-2 Delta India 1 of Chapter 15 of the City of Brantford Municipal Code be waived in order to allow delegations to speak having registered after the 9 a.m. deadline.
All right, any discussion on that? Seeing no hands raised. Oh, sorry, Councillor Vandersteldt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, clerk staff, have we ever gone through this exercise before where we waived the rules and allowed somebody in after the deadline on this term of council?
Through the chair, on this term of council, yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wall, to the resolution allowing delegations to speak.
No, I'm okay.
All right, so Julie, if you'd please take the vote. Again, requires 7 voting in favor.
The motion to waive the rules to permit the delegations to speak after the 9 a.m. deadline is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vandersteldt, Celeste, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, and Utley.
All right, now that we have all the procedural niceties out of the way, we can proceed to hear from the 2 delegations. So the first delegate are 2 people, Constantine and Lisa Carmeras, and I understand they're in the waiting room. They wish to speak to the payday motion.
Hello.
Yeah, so you've got a total of 10 minutes for your comments, including any questions that members of the committee may have of you.
Okay. Hello, councillors. Thank you and my apologies for the not meeting the deadline. I unfortunately have not been through this kind of process, and this is in a time sensitive right now, and this has all sort of come about very, very quickly. And with the support of Councillor Martin, as well as Councillor McCreary, we are able to perhaps expedite this situation that has occurred. We are the landlords of this property, and we were not notified when the payday loan operation ceased its operations, and the license at that point in time being expired as well. Had we known that, we would have been able to somehow secure that. We do have a tenant who is interested. The unit right now has leasehold improvements that value this sort of operation to continue. It would be a shame that, over $100,000 worth of leasehold improvements would have to be, to the wayside when a tenant is willing, under these trying times, to be able to open up a business for Brantford, for the community of Brantford, for the customers that are very, very familiar with the location, as well as the type of business that operates in this unit. We are asking for the license to be reinstated, and we hope for your support in that. Otherwise, we sit with an empty unit, and like I said, under these difficult times, it is quite pleasing to be able to have somebody who's interested in opening up a business as well.
All right. Anything else you wish to add to that, Lisa? I'm not suggesting you have to, but
no, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Yeah.
All right, so I'll see if there's any questions. So does anybody have any questions? You raise your hand. Not seeing any. Thank you very much, Lisa. There were no questions.
Okay.
We'll be dealing with this probably immediately after the next delegation.
Okay.
So hang on and watch, and we'll deal with it tonight.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We have a second delegate or a second delegation. So I now ask, I believe it's Mr. Carr who's here to speak to the odor bylaw. So James, are you here? There you are.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You've got 10 minutes.
It won't be 10 minutes, so thank you so much, sir. Mayor Davis, members of councils, good evening. I'm here tonight to speak in favor of moving forward on the odor control bylaw that's being proposed this evening. I'm appreciative of the waiving of the rules. It's been a bit busy, hectic few days for myself personally, so I do appreciate that. I first became involved in this issue back in January after residents and myself, including myself, started noticing the smell, which had kind of been permeating for a long time, but no one ever was able to tell me at least where it was coming from. But it's a smell of strong cannabis, and it's not a recreational use. It's not somebody in their backyard having a good time. There's a commercial facility or an industrial facility, and it's affecting my family and the neighborhood. So specifically, I'd like to speak to why there is a need for this bylaw. So as I said, for quite some time, East Ward residents have endured excessive strong cannabis odors emanating from this facility near Conklin Park. I've had the opportunity to speak with a few members of council in private communications emails about this. And what I've learned, and I'm sure you all know, is that this is an issue that's again been put on the city to solve, as the other level of governments are not interested in helping this neighborhood. The smell is pretty strong. I've detected it as far as King George School, sorry, in my neighborhood, and it's unacceptable that it's that permeating. So my view is eventually this area is going to have a fantastic new park at Arrowdale. I'm a big proponent of that. And after all the struggles and arguments and the investment that's going to go into the site, to have it ruined by this odor only points to the fact that we need this bylaw in existence, and we need it in existence as soon as possible. East Ward has waited months. I encourage the city to use its powers under the Municipality Act to protect our neighborhoods from these obnoxious fumes. The matter before you suggests the end of 2021 for staff to report back. I would encourage you to change that to as quickly as possible. We've all been doing our part in Brantford to try to stop the spread of COVID, and part of that is staying in our own backyards. And it's hard to do that when you have these type of odors emanating throughout your neighborhood at all times of night. It's there when I leave for work in the morning. It's there when I get back. It's in my car when I'm driving to work. I'm not the only one who's facing this. And it's important that the city have this bylaw because we're going to grow and prosper in the coming years. And we just had a really good presentation about this infill opportunity at the Grayfield site, and we want to make Brantford an attractive place to invest. And it's hard to do that when the city doesn't have the ability to solve these types of issues as they come up. So I would like to thank the fact that this bylaw is being considered. And we want to ensure that not just this East Ward neighborhood, but other neighborhoods in Brantford don't suffer the same fate of having to be left in between levels of government and waiting for the good old fashioned finger pointing to start. This bylaw will put the power in the hands of the city to protect its neighborhoods. And I strongly encourage council and staff to move forward with adopting this order bylaw. I've seen in the past when the city has made something a priority and how quickly we can get things done. I would encourage that sort of teamwork and focus, laser-like vision to solve not just this problem, but future problems that may arise. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, James. So, Councillor Carpenter, you're first up for questions.
James, thanks for coming, and thanks for thinking about the neighborhood, and thanks for communicating with me, and certainly spread the word around the neighborhood that we're working on this problem and have been working on it for some time, as you and I know from discussion. You'd like to see an actual bylaw in place this year, would you not?
Yes, sir, absolutely. I don't think we can go through another summer of dealing with this. It gets worse in the hot and humid weather. It was pretty bad last year. I'm afraid it's going to be bad this year. And I've been pushing for this strong because it's gotten to the point where I can't take my kids to the backyard to play on our playground set because it smells like the newsroom of High Times magazine.
Yes, it smells like skunk and the neighborhood. Now, have you noticed that the factory also has broken windows in it? There's no restricting the airflow. There isn't any ventilation restrictions. There isn't any kind of restrictors of odor from the building. It seems that, that you notice that the smell is unlimited.
I've not noticed any real dissipation. It depends on wind direction, of course. If we got a good southerly wind, then I'm okay, but I'm sure my neighbors to the north or to the north of that facility are probably doing quite poorly. So, but it's a bad odor, and I know everybody recognizes it, and it's just been this this back and forth. You know, it's the federal government, it's the provincial government. Well, yet again, here we are having to have the municipality solve the problem that the other level of governments seem not to want to do.
Yeah, you are aware that there's a license by the federal government for medical marijuana. Are you also aware that our police department had to bust the location for growing plants illegally, more plants than they were licensed for?
Not to that effect. I've heard other residents mention that, but nothing factual. So I didn't see.
Okay, thanks for coming, James. I appreciate you helping with the neighborhood and spreading the word that we as a city are going to solve this problem that the federal and provincial government seem to refuse to do. Thank you.
That's it, James. And you certainly hit a popular refrain when you talked about the higher levels of government not dealing with issues, and then we have to deal with them. We're at the lower level of government, but sometimes it feels like we're the final end of government. But you know, the task falls to us, and we take it on. So thank you very much. And again, this will be the second item we deal with following the delegation portion. So with that, I think that completes the delegation. So we can now deal with the first matter that there was a delegation in respect to. That means Councillor Martin, you're up. If you want to move your motion, please, and state your seconder.
Thank you. Do you need the whole motion read or just the title?
Well, because we have viewers watching, probably best to read it again. We can get it up on the screen. You can speak.
Yeah, I move, seconded by Councillor McCurry, whereas council at its meeting held February 22nd, 2021, reduced the payday loan establishment licensing availability to 9 licenses and removed 190-192 King George Road as an available address. And whereas the current owners of the property at 190-192 King George Road were not notified in advance of the change of status of their property, and whereas the current owners have a new tenant prepared to lease the space for a payday loan operation, now therefore be it resolved, A, that staff be directed to present to council for consideration an amending bylaw to Municipal Code Chapter 326, Schedule A-14, to 1, provide a licensing cap of 10 payday loan establishments, and 2, list 190-192 King George Road as an available location for a license to be issued to. And speaking to this, I think if the owners of the plaza had known that this was coming to council, they would have made delegation at that time to request that we not reduce the number of licenses and remove their property, because they're in the process of lining up a new tenant to take advantage of the $100,000 worth of leasehold improvements that have been done to this unit to reestablish a payday loan facility at that location. And I think it's the other good news for this change is that the original company that was there was a Texas-based company, and now it's being replaced by a Toronto-based company. So it's keeping the profits within Canada. And I think that's good news for our country. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no other speakers. Oh, Councillor Van Tilburg. Yeah.
I have some questions for staff. What in the original payday loan resolutions, what is the purpose behind the number of locations?
Through the chair, Jill Binkley, Supervisor of Licensing, to Councillor Van Tilburg. So the 10 locations came about as a result of council's review of the current environment. So what the current landscape was within the city, we had 2 clusters of 5 locations. King George Road was one of the clusters, and the other cluster is sort of closer to downtown. So we had 2 evenly split clusters. The Payday Loans Act does allow for council to limit the number of licenses available to payday loan establishments. And so I believe council chose at that time to maintain the 10 that were in the city, but they also wanted to be aware if there was an opportunity to reduce the cap at some point. And so really the driving principle behind that and behind the Payday Loans Act and the Putting Consumers First Act is really around consumer protection.
Okay, very good. So we did what we were supposed to do based on the original resolution, and that was as one goes down, we would then release the license. Is that correct?
That is correct. Staff committed to making council aware when there was an opportunity. Yeah.
So it was there. It was made aware. If there was where there's another cluster area, say in the 5th ward, and that payday loan was going to leave, they could go to the other location, could they not? The King George Road, because it's not based exactly on the street location, is it?
Through the chair, that is correct. So because the bylaw was brand new, the existing locations were noted within the bylaw. So that may be something that council wants to look at in future, is to take out the exact locations and just maintain the cap. Staff can certainly administer it that way. There's also 2 that are flagged within the bylaw that are within sensitive land uses. So there's 150 meter distance separation.
Right.
So we also flag those as well.
So we had all these reasons for doing this. And so now really the question before us is, do we want to go from 9 licenses to 10? It's not really about location, is it? It's about going from 9 licenses to 10. So we have 9 licenses out there, and what we will be voting on is whether we go to 10. So just to make that clear, it's not about the location. I understand that they would like that, and they would like their location used, but it could have been anywhere else. So if we up it to 10 and somebody else goes and gets in there, they could be odd person out. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think that's the delegation actually mentioned the tight timeframes, and that's why we tried to get it to council as quickly as we were made aware of it, so that there was an opportunity to reduce the cap at that time.
Okay, and giving no notice to anybody else out there. I don't know if that's fair or not. What if somebody else said, I have a better location even, and I would like to go to that if you're going to go to 10. So, I mean, there's that aspect to it. And I understand what's going on, but I think what we have to remember is what was the original goal. Now, I'm going to be voting against this. And I know Councillor Weaver will be coming back if he can't get on tonight. We'll be addressing this in a couple weeks when we come back for council to have a further debate on it. But at the end of the day, it's not specific to the
Councillor Van Tilburg, you hit the 4 minutes.
Thank you. That's good enough.
Okay. All right, Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Van Tilburg hit some of the points I was going to hit. I do feel for the landlord that they have an empty space, especially given the times. And probably if it was any other type of business, I'd be more apt to vote in favor of this. I am not in favor of the payday loan model. We work a lot with this with my other job, and particularly because of the state we're in. So it may be a good situation for a landlord, and I completely understand that. But I am concerned about putting more consumers at risk and being more vulnerable to the type of business that it is. So I also will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace, you're next.
I guess my question is for our staff. Is there a way, like, I would imagine this is time sensitive or we wouldn't have had a motion to waive the rules, but I'm on the fence about this right now. And before this comes back to council, if it comes back to council, I want to know what the public thinks. Because I mean, at the end of the day, this is their neighborhood. And if they want to see a payday loan store open up, or they're apathetic to a payday loan store opening up, I mean, this isn't like, we have counselors for the ward. right? And this is being brought forward by the ward councillors who represent the people in the ward. So I'm just kind of, typically I would support the ward councillors. So is there an opportunity for us to have some sort of public consultation regarding whether or not they would want to see this site open up in their neighborhood? Sorry, before you answer, Brian, I'm just thinking, like, when I was a kid in Daubeny Plaza, they were trying to get a liquor license to sell alcohol in one of the restaurants, and notice was sent out to everybody saying, like, hey, do you want to allow this place to get a liquor license? Couldn't we do something like that about this payday store? That's my question.
I think there's two answers there, Councillor. I'll answer your second question first. I believe the example you used when you're a kid, that would have been on the Liquor Control Board of Ontario and the survey they used to do when they used to apply for licensing. I'm not sure if they still do that now, but I know they used to do that. And the second thing, Councillor, while we've had situations just recently, we've asked them to do a survey of citizens through our Let's Talk Brantford platform on a matter of social services committee. We could use that if council so directs us to do that. That's we're directed by social service committee to get some feedback on another matter. We could do that if council would like us to, but there's no requirement to officially survey the neighborhood as you're suggesting, but we could do a process on our website through Let's Talk Brantford.
How long would that take?
We did one before, Councillor, which on the social services side, which was over a 10-day period, much the same as this. Obviously, the shorter the period, the shorter the notice time, the less results you get, but it still is a process that's open to the public and they can respond there. We can bring back the data, which is quantifiable from that Let's Talk Brantford platform.
How would I go about doing that?
I suggest you bring an amendment.
Right now? Well, I mean, I guess after everyone speaks, I'll figure it out.
Yeah. All right. Finished, Councillor Well, subject to possible amendment. Yeah. Okay, Councillor McCurry.
Mayor, thank you very much. To be clear, we are not creating another store. We are simply maintaining the location that was in existence and that this council at the time felt was a fair and honest thing to do to maintain that license in place. So to say that we're adding a new one and creating havoc in the neighborhood, I think is somewhat off the mark. Let's remember that although some councillors are rubbed the wrong way by these types of businesses, and we all have some feelings about that, they are legally operating businesses. We're not talking about the mob here. We're talking about businesses that operate within the law and that are enabled by provincial and federal legislation, okay? I think, you know, when we want to hear about what people think about it, I think what you can hear from people is that they use these places because they don't have access to banks and they don't have access to credit cards. So it's a needful service, and that's why there's so darn many of these things around, because people are in a bad way and they need to use them. And I'm not so sure that our point of view should be preventing people from, you know, doing harm to themselves. I mean, if you look at the harm that we enable downtown with passing out free needles, this pales in comparison to that. So we do have a cap. The cap will revert to what it was. And I think, you know, I think we want to be fair to the business that's invested all this money. And now we'll see that that investment flush down the toilet if we don't allow them to put in another operator to use that space. You know, we fell all over ourselves earlier today, and justly so, praising the developer on Colburn Street for their investment in the municipality. Well, what we're seeing here is a smaller investment that these folks have made on King George Road, and let's allow them to reap the benefits of their investment. You know, a number of us are or have been in business here, and I think we should understand what that means to the folks that run that little shop. To be able to put a tenant in there and to not have to spend 6 figures again to equip it for a different tenant. So I would hope that everybody could find it in their hearts today to let these people continue to benefit from the big investment they've made, just like the folks that we entertained earlier are going to benefit from the investments they're about to make in the city of Brantford. I'll remind you that we're supposed to be business friendly, and the fact that we may not necessarily like the kind of business that the Carmeris' tenants are going to be, I think we should respect the investments they've made and allow this to go forward. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Councilor Carpenter, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I'm not a fan of payday loans. They are, as previous speaker said, is a legal business. I said legal, not illegal. And you know, we have this, the province and the federal government. Federal government hasn't changed the banking regulations that requires banks to provide people with a bank account. And so people are forced to go to payday loans because they don't have another option. And we had some courage in the federal government at all levels of political parties to change the Banking Act. We may not need payday loan companies in the first place. And what they charge, the exorbitant interest rate, is astonishing, and people should check into that and find out what it is. It's the poor be eaten up even further by the wealthy, but it is legal, as are pawn shops. You know, we have scrap yards. They don't have to report, you know, brand new bolts and nuts coming in from the business around the corner, not their responsibility. They don't have to report catalytic converters coming in to scrap yards. They don't have to report that anywhere. You know, so we're allowing these kind of things to happen in our community because the government above us, again, federal and provincial, don't have the courage to make rules that make people accountable. So at this stage, I'm going to support the resolution because it's a legalized business. My only concern would be is that we are specifying in this bylaw, or in this resolution, excuse me, that this particular location is specified in the resolution. This location be granted the 10th location, and I'm sort of okay with that because the King George Road location is all right. But my concern would be: is there somewhere else, somebody out there that was in the process of building into their business, one of these businesses that are legal? And are they now locked out, or do we create a monopoly of 10 businesses that can only operate under this business? And these are the 10. And are those licenses transferable? And I'm hearing from staff that it's the license that we're allowing 10. So if I own the license and I got the business and I'm in this location, I can move anywhere I want with my license because we're still limited to 10. So I guess as the owner of the business, under the way we're doing it, the business they could say to the owner, well, I don't know if I want to pay that kind of rent. I'm going to move somewhere else with my license and my business. And that seems to be available. So I'm not sure if we've really got the rabbit down the hole here. We've really seemed to me that we haven't really thought all this through in the full scheme of things. I'll support the councillor's resolution because they're recognizing something that was happening to someone that was already in the process and got caught between the cracks. And I think that needs to be rectified. Thank you.
Councillor Van der Stel.
Thank you, Chair Davis. I can support this. I can probably support it again at council, but I would like to hear what Councillor Wall will bring forward. I would like from staff with the same amendment, or if not necessary, if it's directions of staff, I would like to know whether or not there was anybody else waiting in the wings for a turnkey operation. If they did have an application in, or they had started the process of applying for, I'd like to know. I'd like to be business friendly as often as possible, but I just want to make sure that we are not upending someone else's plans, someone else's communications, someone else's business plan for that location, and that we do have a good handle on what our cap is. So I'm going to leave that to Councillor Wall or anybody else to bring that forward. I can support it at council with report back from staff and just a surety from the neighborhood that the uses were compatible with the needs and the desires of the neighborhood there. Perhaps they didn't want it, perhaps they did want it, but I would certainly like to extend the invitation to them to let us know whether or not there was anything they took into account that they experienced while that first business was operating. If they left on bad terms, it suggests to me that it may not be a prime location for a business like that. It may not be enough call for business. I just need a little bit more information before I put that final vote in on the council night. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so I still have in the first time speaking order, I have Councillor Sluss next, then Councillor Utley. I think pretty much everybody has spoken to it. And at that point, Councillor Wall will hear your amendment if you're still doing that. So Councillor Sluss, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mrs. Binkley. do we license the operator or the location?
Through the chair to Councillor Celeste, that's a great question. We license the operator, so the business operator, the person responsible for compliance with the licensing bylaw.
So if the person doesn't continue to operate the business, there's nothing prohibiting them from renewing the license. So that license has value. If the license number are capped, that license has value. So he could sell that license to whoever he chose. Is that not correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Celeste, in this particular case, the file was actually closed. So the business owner confirmed with licensing that the file was to be closed. They were no longer operating. And that's when we jumped on it immediately and brought it forward to council when there was that opening.
But if that person hadn't have done that, the person could have closed their business but continued to pay the renewal on their license, and they owned a license that now had value. We had approved 10 licenses. They owned one of those 10. Is there anything in the license that says you have to operate, or you just have to get a license? Or you can come, once you have a license, as long as you renew it and keep it in good standing, you wouldn't lose your license. Not unlike a driver's license. You don't have to drive because you have a driver's license. And if you keep renewing it, you will always have one.
Through the chair, the payday loan business licenses wouldn't be transferable. So whether they kept them and renewed and not operated, I see Tanya jumping on here, so I'll give that over to her.
Okay.
Through the chair to Councillor Celeste. So those licenses, yeah, would not be transferable. That was part of establishing the cap. So what there is a mechanism to control that from potentially occurring. And so that we would afford us the opportunity to come back to committee council and say, would you like to uphold the 10 cap or would you like to not reduce that? And so that's what's brought us to today.
Okay, so it's right in that license then that it's not transferable.
It's in the bylaw.
It's in the bylaw?
Which authorizes the issuance of the license, yes.
Okay. And then just one final question. What zoning permits this activity to take place? What zoning do they have to be in?
Through the chair to Councillor Celeste. So that particular property is zoned C8, which is commercial. And in the zoning bylaw, there's about 50 permitted uses. So there's a number of things that can be.
Sorry, Jill, that's not my question. If we were going to increase this to 11 licenses, and I wanted to buy that 11th license, what type of zoning would I have to look for to be able to operate?
I believe it's general office zoning.
General office zoning, that's where they're allowed, nowhere else?
Well, that's part of the C8 for commercial.
Okay.
But perhaps there's a planning expert on here that could explain better.
No, that's fine. I wasn't clear on that myself, but I appreciate your attempt. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yep. So, Councillor Utley, you're the last speaker before we have any amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we know what illegal loan sharking operators charge their clients?
Not sure, Councillor. Can someone answer that question?
Through the chair, I wouldn't know what illegal operations would charge.
Yeah, I would think that, although I don't like the pay loan operations, they do offer a safer haven for people that need money or need checks cashed. And I'm gonna support this, but I wish the government would put a more reasonable cap on what they can charge clients that use these businesses. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Wall, you still interested in that amendment?
You bet I am, because this is just a committee meeting. This isn't a council meeting. So seeking a seconder, I believe Clerks has written up an amendment for me. Could you bring it up on the screen?
Sorry, through the chair, I have not drafted something at this point in regards to the motion that you are seeking. If you can provide me a bit of information as to what you're looking to do, I can do that.
I believe somebody has it. was on the phone with staff.
So what I was saying, if I can through Mr. Chair, what I was saying to Councillor Wall was offline was that we've worked this out as a view an amendment, and that we could possibly look to come back. Councillor Wall would like to make an amendment that staff come back with a survey. We could do a 7-day survey and bring that back to council for their information on whether citizens have opinion on this or not. So Julie.
There we go. So moved. Seeking a seconder. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I'd actually suggest that what it should say is that the amendment is that prior to this coming to council, that staff be directed to do a Let's Talk survey in respect to the resolution.
There we go.
That's similar to what we did at social services. We have a seconder for that. I thought Councillor Vanderstill, I think, is seconding that. All right, so any discussion on the amendment to use our Let's Talk Brantford format for this? Did you want to say further? Well, Councillor Well?
Ultimately, I was just going to echo what I had said earlier about wanting to support the ward councillors on this, and also that this is a private enterprise at the end of the day, and private citizens, public members of the community, they can choose whether or not they go into this business and support it or not. And I don't necessarily know that, you know what, I'm going to leave it. If you want to use the place, use the place. If you don't want to use the place, don't use the place. But I would still like to hear what the public has to think, which is the reason I'm moving this amendment before it comes to council and we make a final decision on this.
All right. Next to the amendment, Councillor Celeste.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only concern with this is a number of people out in Shutters Lane area could determine the outcome of this poll, which to me, I thought the intent of the poll was to find out what that neighborhood felt about having that store in their neighborhood. So the poll to me is irrelevant. It tells you nothing that you want to know. It tells you what somebody in Shutters Lane might want to tell you. But if you're concerned about the neighborhood and the ward councillors, then this poll is too wide open, and it's not talking about a neighborhood. It's talking about an entire city, and I don't know if anybody in the city could tell you whether we had 9 or 10 or 15 or 4. They wouldn't know how many we have because they're scattered throughout the city. So I'm not sure what's gained by doing this. To me, you're going to get an answer, but does the answer have any validity to it? I would doubt it. It's not going to come from that neighborhood. If there was a circulation of that neighborhood and they remitted something as far as their thoughts, that would have merit. But to just have an open-ended question to a random number of people, it solves nothing. So I'm not sure I can support the amendment. I support getting information, but the information we're getting, to me, is not valid information, Mr. Mayor.
Right, Councillor Van Tilburg to the amendment.
Yes, the fact is that payday loans affect the entire community. And the people that use them aren't from a specific area. They just use them when they need them. And I have a question for staff. What is the name of the government legislation for the act that we did this change under?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, there is the Payday Loans Act, and then there's also the Putting Consumers First Act.
The Putting Consumers First Act. So therefore, this question is valid to everybody that is a consumer and putting the consumers first. So the question to the consumers should be along the lines of, in these questions is, 1, do we know the area that's going to be, but 2, should Brantford go from 9 to 10 or increase the number of payday loans in the city? That is a valid debate on Let's Talk that people should have. It is literally the debate that brought us to the position that we're at. So Councillor Wall is quite right in bringing this to the debate. People will have an opinion, and they will know whether Brantford's going in the right direction or a direction they accept, whichever way you have it, with regards to payday loan establishments, and whether we grow more in the city or we reduce them as we go, or if we have the right number of licensees. But that's a good question for the public. So it isn't really limited to the area because, as we know, it is a license, and that license is transferable and can move from location to location. We did look at on other opportunities for zoning areas, and I believe that's how Hamilton had done it. And it was decided that was not as necessarily a more positive way than the way that we had chosen. So, I mean, that is the road that we got here. I'm sure Councillor Weaver could go into far more detail on it, and I'm sure I will. So I'm going to support the amendment, but I would like to see questions that are applicable to what the Let's Talk in the community of Brantford is. There are two sides to this, not just one.
Okay, Councillor Martin, you're next to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Councillor Sluss hit this right on the head. This amendment doesn't address the area. It's put out to the entire city and beyond, as we've seen with other petitions recently. What I can tell councillors is I have never had a single complaint about the previous business that operated at this location. And there's never been anybody that said to me, we need fewer payday loan companies. And as Councillor McCurry said, it is a business that is utilized. Otherwise, there wouldn't be 10. The fact that we had 10 shows that there's enough business for these businesses to keep going. And I don't think I'll be supporting the amendment, but we'll see what happens. Thank you.
Councillor Vanderstel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I said, I'll be supporting the resolution and the amendment. All I want is more information. I really don't want to get into an amendment to an amendment, but bottom line is, can we do both? Can we do the survey and can we do the circulation in the neighborhood, just to be sure? Is that considered friendly? Is that something that we can do? I'm seeing friendly hands.
Well, I would suggest we ask staff. I mean, it's a very tight timeline in terms of getting it to council.
So what we can do, if I can through Mr. Chair, we can't narrow it to a neighborhood, but we can ask, this is what we did in the budget requests. We can ask people to put in their postal codes. That helps us narrow it to a neighborhood, but we can't narrow the IP address, but we can ask them for their postal code. That's where we can say what neighborhood this is, but they have to honestly put in their proper postal code.
Yeah, I think Mr. Hutchings, the request is whether it's feasible to do something like what we do with a planning zone, a rezoning, where you have a mailing that goes out to those within 200 meters, I guess, or 120 meters.
We wouldn't have the time to do that. We're looking at a 7-day window to do that. It'd have to be the Let's Talk Brantford platform, and it just we wouldn't have that ability just that certain neighborhood. People would have to put in their postal code.
Anything else for Councillor Vanderstel?
No, I'll listen to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor McCurry, next to the amendment.
Mayor, thank you. I'll be supporting the councillor's amendment because I respect his motivation in doing it. He's sincere about engaging the community in their opinions, and I'm happy to support that. I can't think that it's going to change any minds. It certainly won't change my mind because I suspect that it'll be utilized by some group of ideologues out there that's completely opposed to payday loans, and they're all going to know that they just have to put in the N3R prefix on the postal code, and it'll look just like they come from the Third Ward. So I won't be changing my mind on this because I'm supporting the business owner, and I'm supporting the needs of people in the community. As I said earlier, we wouldn't have these stores if they didn't serve a need. And you know, Councillor Carpenter hits the nail on the head when he says that it's all about changing this legislation that allows people to be put in these positions, not just by the payday loan companies, but by the provincial and federal governments and by the banks and everybody else that has caused this situation. So I will support it, and I'll be most interested in seeing the outcome. And I hope everybody will support not only the amendment tonight, but will support the main motion and come back here at council night and repeat.
All right, Councillor Carpenter to the amendment.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the amendment. I'm very enthusiastic to hear how supportive council is on consulting the public on a very controversial issue, or a minimal controversial issue in the community. I only wish that we had the same amount of support when you were making decisions about the 4th ward, that you would have consulted the public with the same amount of enthusiasm. So thank you very much.
All right, Councillor Wall.
Thanks for your
Hang
indulgence.
on, let's Councillor Antosky. She hasn't spoken yet to the amendment.
You got it.
Councillor Antosky.
You're muted, Cheryl.
My apologies. I'm going to support the amendment. As was pointed out by Jill Binkley earlier, this is a license that could be located anywhere in the city, not just tied to the that address. So I think it's important to know. And that's all on the amendment. I do have more to say once we go past the amendment. Thank you.
I believe you said you're up next, Councillor Wall.
Yes, I said, so you've got one more shot at this amendment.
Just want to clear up any kind of misunderstanding. So I have a phone, a council phone right here, paid for by the taxpayer, that regularly lights up with phone calls and emails from members of the community about all sorts of issues. The whole let's talk thing, part of my amendment, is just one small part. I'm just trying to make a fuss out of this. And I know that that might seem abnormal for Councillor Wall to make a fuss out of something. I just think that before this comes to council, I want our media partner, who I hope, media partners who are watching and listening, clearly this is something a little controversial. And I want people to call me and Councillor McCreary and Councillor Utley and Councillor everyone and just say, hey, we want this, or hey, we don't, before. I thrive on community engagement. That's all I'm asking. If you're watching or you're listening or you're reading or you're watching a replay on this later on, if you care even a little bit about what we're talking about here tonight, could you give us a call and let us know what you think? That's what we're here for. We're supposed to represent you. I hate making decisions without hearing your opinion. That's all I'm asking. It's not intended for people to fraud the voting system. It's not intended for people to try to deceive us and to trick us into approving or not approving this. I just want to know what you think. Honest to God, that's all I care about, is what you want us to do in this room 2 weeks from now. So please engage with us. I promise I'll engage back. And I do hope I can get the support of this committee for that. Thank you.
All right, let's, no further hands up. Let's call the vote. Julie, if you'd please take the vote on the amendment.
The amendment on the item carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Slass, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, and Utley.
All right, so we have the resolution, Councillor Martin's resolution, as amended by Councillor Wall. So we now again have two speaking opportunities if you wish, 4 minutes each. And I'm seeing Councillor Antosky, you're first on the list.
Thank you, Mayor. I feel a little like we're contradicting ourselves this evening. We had another issue earlier this evening that talked about other levels of government and things out of our control. And so we made a plan to do something within our control to change it based on what our community wanted. And so yes, it's a legal business, and you know, people can choose to be in whatever kind of business they want to. But as council, we had decided that we wanted to start limiting this type of business, and there's others as well that we have limits on in terms of distances and all of those things. So in this case, because the upper levels of government are not doing what we hoped they would, we are making a decision locally that helps to control this or helps to create a more balanced situation for our community. So I think that we do what we can within our local decisions, and we make bylaws specific to us. And that doesn't mean we're voting, you know, to put somebody out of business or to, you know, it's a legal business, any of those things. It's based on what we believe our community wants, or what is hurtful or harmful or good for our community, which is why I think going out and getting more community consultation is great. But you know, this is limiting the licenses is something we took on locally because we can't get the upper government controls on the other pieces of this. Thank you.
Councillor Van Tilburg.
There we go. Now it's stayed off. Question for staff. The Putting Consumers First Act, that's done by the provincial government?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilburg, yes, I believe so. And that,
yes, and that act puts these decisions into our hands to address.
Yes, the Payday Loans Act of 2008 also has some information, but I could certainly source it for you and send it if that helps.
I'm more or less interested in the Putting Consumers First Act. I believe between the two, that was the motivation for the angle that Councillor Weaver found in order to address the proliferation of payday loan companies, which was something that we as a council had chosen to address, and this was the mechanism that we chose to address it with. So I think we can all be clear that this decision is actually in our hands and no one else's hands. And what we decide is what we decide. We don't need to point fingers at anybody else. The tools have been given to us and we get to choose. And so with that, we'll have some public input. But this was ours. We had made this choice. I believe this was 2 years in the making from Councillor Weaver, spreading over a lot of legwork into this. And, you know, so this is what we came forward with as our option to address payday loan companies. And that was passed by us. I don't know if it was unanimous or not, but I know it was pretty darn popular and pretty well accepted. And so here we are being challenged at our first time at testing this. So we may get feedback one way or the other, but at the end of the day, it will be our decision. It will be in our hands, and we will determine which direction we want to go and how this works or does not work. And what we were trying to deal with was the putting consumers first and the proliferation of payday loans and the effect that it has on our communities and those that use them. So no, I don't think in this case that we're passing the buck on this vote. There's other things to address, but on this vote, this is ours and it's our choice.
Councillor McCreary.
Mayor, thank you very much. You know, this isn't a proliferation. This is simply a course correction. We had not anticipated that a circumstance like this might have arisen. Perhaps if we had employed Councillor Wall's penchant for consultation, we might have consulted the operators and the companies to see if they thought it might be beneficial to be notified. You know, in the case of a loss of a license, or if there's a way that they thought maybe we should accommodate things like we've got before us today. So had we foreseen that circumstance, tonight it would not be an unforeseen circumstance, which we are trying to do our best to correct on behalf of the property owner. So as I said before, I hope everybody will support this tonight. Let's not let this get, you know, blown out of proportion. What we're doing really is simply reintroducing a license that previously existed.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A question through the staff. Was there an application to reestablish a payday loan at this location?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, no, we've not received an application for this location.
Okay, and in the bylaw, are the licenses tied to their current location or can they be moved to another location?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, they are, the way that they're written is tied to a location, and that was by design when we initiated this license in order to address the cap. So as Jill commented at the very beginning, what you may want to consider is actually removing the addresses and just giving us direction to maintain the cap, if that's the will of council and committee.
Okay, well, I don't think we need to worry about that just yet. what I see this resolution being is about fairness. We cannot bylaw a business out of existence. It's not something we can do. And this is essentially doing the same thing by way of license instead of bylaw. I think in fairness to the property owners, they've done some significant upgrades to this unit to make it suitable for this particular type of business. Now, it's been stated that people don't like the payday loan model. It's not a business that I intend to utilize anytime soon. But along those lines, there are people that need these places. And along those lines, I challenge every member of council to go into a bank branch that you don't do business at and see if you can get a loan for $100. I think you'll find that that's impossible. And these places offer a service that will do that, something that you can't do in a bank. The idea that that we need to get the reaction of the public, I supported the amendment. Councillor Wall sold me on it, but I think we need to take the information that comes back with a grain of salt, because there is a good chance that the system will be gamed. And I don't put a lot of stock in petitions in any case, so I'm not really sure that I'll put much stock in the results of this consultation, but it'll be interesting to see what comes back. But it'll be interesting to see if anybody will take me up on my $100 challenge. Thank you.
So I've not previously been able to ask questions. I can ask a question. So what we have here are two competing interests. We have the issue of fairness to a property owner who didn't get any notice. And then, of course, we have the dealing with the issue of payday loans. And the more you have, the more they're used, the more harm potentially. I think the idea or the intent behind this, I wasn't here, I think when we did this, or was I can't remember, but it's the more you have of them, the more they're used. And if you don't believe that as a municipality, as a community, that the use should be encouraged or facilitated, then you try and limit the numbers. And I get that. But it's a question I have for staff. This kind of gets to the fairness issue. So this all came about because the previous operator in this location, they handed their license in, and then staff, you brought forward a resolution, that's what we're really dealing with, right? To then take the action to reduce the number down to 9. Is that correct?
Through to you, Chair. Yeah, that's exactly right. So we received word on January 20th that the licensee was no longer going to be operating from that location and has moved on. And so staff acted very quickly and had a report in front of you for the February 2nd Committee of the Whole. So just to advise you that the market had changed, and given the direction when this was initiated, would you like to change the cap or would you like to maintain it?
Yeah, so I'll commend staff moving very quickly. But if someone had got in there and that 3 or 4 10-day period, whatever it is, and they submitted their application, then it'd be 10, right?
Through to you, Mayor. So we'd have a look
at that location.
Yes. So because that location is listed in the licensing schedule and they require a provincial license in order to gain one of our licenses, we would likely need to address what had transpired at that address, but seemingly, yes, that would still have occurred.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought. So that, I think, adds credence to the fairness argument, but interesting. So, Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I'll address the fairness argument. The owner of the payday loans establishment is not the owner of the property. So by saying that you're going to attach to this property, you may be giving the property owners an unfair advantage over other property owners and may provide leases to those that want to do payday loans if our limit is 10. So what we've had brought forward to us and who spoke to us is the owners of the property. They aren't intending to open a payday loan. They're intending to offer that option that nobody else will have in the community. We will be, in fact, we won't be opening up businesses for competition. We'll be making an exclusivity to this particular location that will then have ability to have payday loan operation there. And all they then got to do is go find a tenant that wants to operate a payday loan business. And they've got not only a willing tenant, they have a captive tenant, and maybe even a captive rate that they can charge for fees for the rental of that particular establishment, because they've got now a monopoly on the last available location because the unit is named in this amendment. So those are, we want to talk about fairness. Then the fairness needs to go to all commercial operators across the city that would like to have that 10th location. But we're talking about giving it to one commercial business owner, not the business that will operate the payday loans, but the business that will rent that facility to the payday loans. So if that's what we're going to do, that's fine. And that's where there was one before, and the neighborhood's used to it. If that's what we want to do, keep them clustered, keep them in that location, and then we would vote accordingly. Thank you.
So Councillor Van Tilburg for the second and last time to the resolution.
So it's been said that we don't bylaw people out of business. Well, yes, we do. If this was a strip club and it was downtown on Dalhousie Street, and the thing came, we've got another one coming in, we would be saying, well, sorry, we've changed our direction and we won't do that. We won't give that opportunity to you. And do we have an example of that? Yes, we do. We absolutely have an example of that. So there are certain businesses that are legal, but they aren't necessarily always palatable to council and to councillors. And so again, this does fall into our hands. We have done these things before. There are, I feel bad for the landlord at this time, but I'd say it would be to me the payday loan operator who should be before us, not the landlord. The landlord has a property to rent out. However, I understand the perspective. This is out of their wheelhouse. That's very new for them to come to council. However, we have to look at what are we trying to do. I think this has been a great debate to all my councillors. I think they've made some incredible points here. And I also believe that there will be positions that will not change based on certain values that are before us. So just to be clear though, we have done it in the past. We do things like we make businesses register catalytic converters when we didn't. And I know that happened because I just did that. So it's been said that we don't do that. That was true. We changed some laws. Now we do it. So it is in our hands. It is in our control. It is how we handle this thing. And it will be interesting to see where this ends up. Why? There's still a lot of information to address. This is what happens when we have a spur of the moment resolution that has had no lead in. Probably, and I will be in fairness, that may be how the landlord feels too. I get that. That doesn't change my opinion, however, in this case. So with that, I would just like to say, let's get as much information as we can when we come back to council in 2 weeks. And I have thoroughly enjoyed this debate. There has been some incredible points made that are very valid with regards to whether it's property, whether it's a licensee, whether the locations. This is our first go around with a very new piece designed to tackle a very serious issue in the community, which was the payday loan structure and the effects that it has. So here we go. Let's look forward to the vote.
Well, we still have a few more speakers where we have that vote. So we have Councillor Martin, then Councillor McCreary for their second and last time.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to clarify one thing. We did not bylaw against the strip club on Dalhousie Street. I was on council when council decided to buy that property for the purpose of removing that use from that property. It was not a situation where we made a bylaw and forced an owner to discontinue that business. So I stand by what I said. We cannot bylaw a business out of business. So I just wanted to clarify that point because council of the day made the choice to purchase the property in order to remove that business. Now, if we want to buy up every property where there's payday loan business, then somebody will have to bring that resolution, but I'm not sure I could support that one.
Councillor McCreary.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor. Well, I just want to be clear here about the math. I think we had 10 of these stores early last year, and if this gets approved tonight and again at council, we'll have 10 of them this year. It'll be the same number that we had before. it simply won't be one less. And the other thing I wanted to comment on, Mayor, is a comment by another councillor that this was a spur of the moment thing. I would say that that's incorrect. There was a vote tonight to enable this to come forward. I believe it was unanimous to allow it to come forward. Anybody that was concerned about the speed at which it was arising could have voted in the negative, I guess. But I don't think that happened tonight. And I don't much appreciate the fact that when someone says spur of the moment, that people in the community may get the idea that we're violating our own rules and procedures, and that what happened tonight was not kosher, and it certainly is kosher. We did what we do on so many occasions. We moved to waive the rules, and then we introduced this without having prior notice of motion given. That's what we do. We do it on occasion. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and the public should be aware of that, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote. Julie, if you would please administer the vote.
Item 8.2 as amended has carried on recorded vote of 8-2. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Celeste, Martin, Wall, Carpenter, McCurry, and Etley. Those against, Councillors Antosky and Van Tilburg.
Well, I really didn't think I was going to be in the chair this long tonight with the original resolution brought forward by Councillors Etley and Celeste. But anyway, so I'm now pleased to hand back the chair to Councillor Martin to take over again for the remainder of the meeting.
Thank you. That brings us to resolution 8.1. Councillor Carpenter, I believe you have that one.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chairs, plural. Are we still separating 7.1.1 before we go to resolutions?
Yeah, well, like maybe I can just, I'm kind of tailing over, but I think our general rule is if there's a delegation, we then deal with that issue first. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Just like we dealt with the last one. Thank you. It's moved by myself and seconded by my ward mate, Councillor Charlene Toski. Whereas noxious odors have shown to have a detrimental impact on the health of those living within close proximity to those odors. And whereas the City of Brantford takes very seriously its primary goal to help protect the health of its citizens and to promote a good, healthy living lifestyles. Whereas the Municipal Act allows municipalities to pass bylaws to regulate with respect to noise, vibration, odor, dust, and outdoor illumination, including indoor lighting that can be seen outdoors, and to prohibit the matter described in the clauses above. Unless a permit is obtained from municipality for those matters and any that may impose conditions for obtaining, continuing to hold and renew the permit, including requiring a submission of plans. And whereas currently the bylaw division of the building department lacks the regulatory controls to effectively investigate and regulate odor concerns. Now therefore be resolved that staff be directed to investigate a regulatory scheme to define, investigate, and regulate noxious odors within the corporate limits of the City of Brantford, including and following consultation with other municipalities in Ontario on such a scheme and their successes and failures, and consultation with ministries of the provincial government, most notably the Ministry of Environment and Cultural Change and the Ministry of Labor, and 3, costing of the necessary equipment and training involved to define and regulate odors and noxious odors accordingly. And the staff be directed to provide a report to committee for consideration. As I'm making a minor amendment here, prior to the 3rd quarter of 2021, and that the MPP, the MP, the police chief, the deputy chief, and are be notified as part of this resolution. And if I may speak to it.
Go ahead.
Thank you. This has been a problem. I first raised this issue in 2019, December of 2019, to more notably the building, because there would look like there was dirt being brought into the building on Brock Street factory, the former Lockwood's factory, and a former tire facility. And my concern was substantial because this tire facility had a number of bylaw violations while it was in existence, several of them. In fact, the staff have made a lengthy list of how many times we had to bring charges upon that facility. Then the same owner had started a grow operation in there. The difficulty with 360 Brock Street was very clearly that the grow operator was growing marijuana. So this was highly publicized that when our local police department busted this operation for illegally growing plants. Now, the operation under medical marijuana allows for an operator to grow for 4 people with medical marijuana licenses, and then it allows up to 200 plants each. The difficulty is in this place was growing 3,675 plants when it only had a license, of course, to grow 800 plants. Our police department busted this operation in a highly publicized bust raid that they had to leave the 800 plants that they had a license for. This operation continues to grow marijuana for individuals with medical licenses after already violating the law. And there's 3 individuals that were charged, and they're from the Toronto region that were charged by the police at the time. I had a meeting with the police chief. Thank you to the chair, Mark Littell, who arranged a meeting with myself and the police chief and the deputy to discuss what options are available. They were as frustrated as I that the federal legislation allows such weakness. Now, if you're growing marijuana for public consumption, and we have a number of those plants in our city, you wouldn't know they exist because the regulations for them is very stringent. In fact, they must have scrubbers. They must. There's no odor can be emitted. It's many of us have toured those facilities. Nothing like this facility, which has broken windows, where the air is the smell is wafting out through the neighborhood. Seems to be no requirement for them to do anything in this location, even though they received a building permit to put washrooms in. But that's it. Their Health Canada doesn't seem to have any regulations. I then contacted a number of individuals in regard to this. Phil McComan, I copied, the mayor will know this because I copied him on my letter. Will Boma, the CAO, I contacted him. I contacted Mark Littell, Deputy Saunders, and Police Chief Paul Moore, planning, I copied him. Russ Thompson in building, I copied him. I talked to Gary Anderson, I copied Cannabis Canada on their regulations and trying to understand why would someone that had broken the law been allowed to continue to grow marijuana in this location. And it can happen elsewhere in the community, by the way. So, and I want to thank the CAO because he wrote a lengthy letter to Health Canada, to the Minister Hadju at the time, and asking him, how could Health Canada allow a license to cultivate these plants? And Brantford Police executed a search warrant and found 4,400 plants being cultivated when they only allowed 820 plants, I guess it was. So the police department notified Health Canada the charges against the licensee holders. However, no action has been taken place. The same people seem to be still growing. So, and the operation has continued to grow. The neighborhood cannot access their backyards. Anybody that drives, even if you drive through that neighborhood with your windows up, you will have the smell in your car 6 blocks away. In fact, you'll have to roll your windows on your car when you get to a clean air area just to get the smell out of your car. It's pretty ridiculous. Hamilton had a similar problem, and they actually brought their bylaw in under their nuisance bylaw, as how they brought it in, and they've got fines up to $250,000 if the odor can be smelled in the neighborhood. Residents are just really they've had it up to here. That they contact me on a regular basis, and they ask. Here, I called the bylaw officer. The smell from the cannabis being grown from Brock Street. The smell has been very bad in the last few days. They said there's no bylaw about ventilation, and they want to know if this is true, and there isn't any bylaw for ventilation. I spoke to Phil McColeman's office regarding the smell on Brock Street. They said that changing the federal legislation takes a long time. That passing a bylaw municipally is the fastest way. So Phil McColeman seems to suggest there's nothing he could do as a federal minister responsible for the federal health minister that provides the licensing. And people are wondering if this is a legal operation. And then when you look on the legislation online on the act, it says very clearly about medical marijuana. This will involve reviewing the information submitted to ensure it complies with regulations and responding to requests from law enforcement to confirm the validity of a registration certificate. That's just a certificate issued to the growers. In administering the regulations, Health Canada officials will work closely with a range of groups, including law enforcement, municipalities, provincial and territorial medical licensing authorities, and healthcare professionals, as well as Canadians who are interested in using the program. We have received no such confirmation, no such consultation. The mayor will validate this. We haven't had any consultation at all about how this operation goes. Excuse me. I'd be happy if they just make them put them under the, if you're going to grow medical marijuana, put them under the same regulations that you grow for commercial marijuana for commercial sale, and we won't have this problem. But what's really happening, and Norfolk County has raised this several times, their concern is that, you grow 200 pounds per person. Who uses that much? You obviously know that's going into the black market. So they're feeding the black market by having such loose regulations. This is just feeding the black market and making the illegal activity higher in our community. And this needs to stop. And this poor neighborhood needs some rescue. And I know the resolution is long. Staff have been working on it for some time, trying to find solutions. And so they're looking at different options, and I'd like to see something come back to us as soon as possible. We're probably going to lose the summer season for those people in the neighborhood. I hope I get unanimous support for this. Thank you. You can tell I'm frustrated.
My apologies, I had some technical issues I was dealing with. I didn't see the order in which the hands went up, so I'll take them in the order they are on my screen. Councillor Utley, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've driven past this Brock Street plant 3 or 4 times a week for 6 months, and the smell is appalling. Like you go at least a block in any direction, and it's powerful. And as Councillor Carpenter said, you can have your windows closed in your car, and it overpowers the smell in your vehicle. It's a sickening odor, and how the people living in that area, how they get by with this is beyond me. It's just terrible. This is the only marijuana facility I've seen that doesn't have security fencing around it. It doesn't have any filtration units. You compare that with the plant in Paris, and you can't smell any of the other plants where marijuana is grown in the city that I'm aware of. So this is a standalone place that needs to be shut down, and the sooner the better. And I admire and respect the 2 Ward 4 councillors for bringing this forward, and I fully support this. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Utley. I have Councillor Wall next.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Whew. This suddenly became a really big issue this year, and I'm not saying it wasn't an issue before, but I mean, I'm pretty astute to what's going on in the area, and suddenly I just started getting phone calls and tags on Facebook and emails. The neighborhood association is talking about it, and kudos where kudos is due, because Councillor Carpenter is definitely working hard on this. Everyone that reached out to me mentioned that they had spoken to him about this and that they were working on it. And the same thing with Councillor Antosky and Councillor Van Tilburg as well, because this isn't a new issue. We've all been dealing with it. But like I said, this just hit my radar this year, and I just don't get it. I mean, I'm frustrated too, because I am a problem solver by nature, and this just seems to be something that we've just hit a roadblock on. Not to be foolish, but there seems to be a sentiment in the community that Mayor Davis is the king of Brantford, and he could just walk down and put a lock on the door and shut down the operation, and that's it. It's over. He's the mayor. He can do whatever he wants. Don't quote me on that, because that's not a direct quote. That was pure sarcasm. I wish sometimes that we had the ability to just fix everybody's problems just like that. But that's not democracy. That's not the country that we live in. We live in a society of rules and order, and there's a way of things. And for whatever reason, this is a legal operation following the law. And it's just like so frustrating, because this is in our backyard every single day. This is something that people in this community are dealing with, and I can imagine their frustration. So I hope that we can solve this. I have some really important questions that I want to ask tonight. One, I'm getting poked about the timeline on this. Is it possible to expedite this so that it's not a end of year or Q3 report? Can we move? Can we make it faster? Oh, hi, Gary.
Good evening, Councillor. Through the chair to Councillor Wall, Gary Anderson, Manager of Property Standards and Bylaws. I think it could possibly be moved to second quarter of this year, just pending a bit of a review in light of the comments that were heard this evening. So I don't want to tie the hands of the department, my successor, but I think it's something that that could happen a little bit quicker.
Amazing. So you don't pull your punches, Gary. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I just want you to just give it to me. Just be honest with me. Is this municipality going to have the authority to be able to stop this facility from making odors?
Through the chair to Councillor Wall, it's a relatively new problem. It's not heavily currently regulated amongst my colleagues. I've talked to a few colleagues that have had some successes with some new technology that's available, both from monitoring and measurement perspective. So it is a relatively new phenomenon for those of us in the bylaw business. So we'll certainly be seeking out that information. Found out actually some very interesting information the last couple of weeks. So I'm hopeful with the technology that's available that it is something that we can assist with. I'm not sure we can completely eradicate, but it's something that we can certainly assist with, recognizing that at the end of the day, if there's legal action to be taken, that can also be somewhat time consuming. So I just don't want anybody to have any false hope that once a bylaw is passed, that the odor will be eradicated immediately. That process of enforcement does take a bit of time.
Last question then, and thank you for asking that. If a member of this community wanted to be actively involved in the eradication of this odor or follow up this story, or they had questions that, maybe myself or the other councillors might not be equipped to answer, would they call bylaw, or is there a way to us to work with communications? Like, we've been doing really great with our communications in public and creating websites for things. If this is an issue that is affecting 10,000 people in the surrounding area, that could we have a page where we documented what was going on with this site and how people could be involved, how they could contact their MP and their MPP, or I hate people not knowing what we're doing, and I'm just wondering, like, how can we best keep people informed about what's happening with this conversation?
Through the chair to Councillor Wall, certainly I can tell you that our bylaw response email line is very busily and used on a number of concerns. Our communications department can certainly help us. I don't want to speak for them, but I quite frankly think they're brilliant and put out some good work, and could certainly help us to put that word out to the public to let them know that we're actively engaged in a solution. And to be honest, the more people that know, the more people that can assist. So I think that's
absolutely, absolutely. Sorry, Gary. Thank you. I want to move that friendly amendment. See if that's okay with Councillor Carpenter and his seconder about moving it to Q2.
Okay, it's indicated that's friendly.
Great,
okay,
thank you.
Your time is up, Councillor Wall. So, Councillor Antosky, you're next.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Boy, we were frustrated when there was a tire company there, which we continually had problems with, and now there's this. And I want to thank Councillor Carpenter, who has really carried the ball on this issue. And I had 2 more emails about it today. I get emails on this or a call several times a week. And people are really confused. They don't understand why this place can operate the way it does. They don't understand, they'll send us a copy of our bylaw for the 400 meter distance and say, why are they allowed to do this? And they don't understand that it's a different type of operation, which quite frankly is why Councillor Carpenter and I pushed so hard for the biggest distance we could possibly have, because we didn't really have much faith in the oversight from the federal government in terms of this file. This neighborhood has suffered a lot. It was the tires, now it's the cannabis. We've got a company in the area that, you know, works against the bylaws and knows their hours on a regular basis. They have no peace in their backyards. And Mr. Messaker, who was a delegation earlier tonight, you know, he stated, he says, it's blocks away. It's in your car. You can't go out with your kids. You end up wearing it like a cloak. This has really not only affected quality of life outside that direct neighborhood, that, you know, quite a wide radius, but quite frankly is likely harmful to the health. This is a health issue as well. And I just think no one wants this in their neighborhood, and hopefully it doesn't happen anywhere else in the city. And this neighborhood certainly has suffered enough. And you know, as we said, so Councillor Carpenter has found a way to give us something to have teeth, something that gives us a reason and gives us a way to get in there and check things out. And, you know, it's something. It's hopefully we get more. And I'm so grateful for Councillor Wall for moving up the timeline. I know that Councillor Carpenter was trying to be very respectful of staff's time, because this has been a very complex and convoluted issue. And thank you to Gary for before he exited the screen saying that Q2 would be great. So I hope that we get full support on this. No one should have to live with this in their neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van der Stel.
Thank you, Chair Martin. You're doing a wonderful job tonight. I support this 100%. You know, what we're doing is we're protecting people who truly believe that they're powerless. They don't get a word of mouth with the federal or provincial governments, and we at the municipality end up being the last line of defense against this kind of lunacy. If you adversely affect people's lives because of a legal or illegal business, it's good that our council operates and functions and debates and makes decisions the way it does. If you look at how many times we talk about how many times the province and federal government have dropped the ball, and how many times we have picked it back up and done something leadership worthy on this council, despite our differences, you'd be surprised. We do good work here. We're responding to needs in the community as they arise, and that's what we do well. So here's the next part of the question. When I've heard everybody else speak, I may come back to this with an amendment. We have prevailing southwest winds, and you know, outside of a couple of nor'easters, there's nothing we can do as a municipality if this resolution passes and becomes bylaw and becomes actionable. There is nothing we can do at this point that would stop anyone in the county from setting up on our borders a chicken farm, a rendering plant, a grow operation, a sewage transfer station, a sawmill will be affected. But we will be powerless as a municipality to do anything about it, because we cannot affect legislation in the county of Brant. But we're surrounded by the county of Brant. So after I've heard everybody speak to this, I do have what I hope will be a friendly amendment to take this action even further. I think it deserves a second look, and I think it deserves a bit more teeth. Thank you, Mr. Councilor Martin.
Thank you. Councillor Van Tilburg, you have the floor.
Yeah, Councillor Carpenter, some incredible legwork there on the backgrounds, which leads me to more questions for staff. Can I get a reason why the provincial government, Ministry of the Environment and Energy, can enforce their order bylaws like they do on other industries?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilborg. I would be remiss if I spoke on their behalf. I can tell you over the years, I've had a number of joint initiatives with my provincial counterparts. At times I have found that it to be a very complementary approach, and other times I've found it to be extremely frustrating. So I think, to be honest, and again, not speaking on their behalf, but they also seem somewhat lack of resource to be in Brantford on a regular basis to deal with these sorts of issues. So I think that's part of the problem, is that there's insufficient provincial resources from a staffing perspective to regulate these matters.
And is there a jurisdictional difference between the medical marijuana facilities and the commercial medical marijuana and the commercial marijuana facilities? Is there a difference in jurisdiction or lines?
Through the chair, for the matter that's before you, I would argue no. This is somewhat of a uncharted territory for us to get into, and that's something we're going to have to look into first to separate the two. But and I think that's where you're going to, perhaps this is what Councillor Vanderstel may be referencing, is some teeth and some parameters as to the levels. We're going to have to get some parameters on what a noxious odor is and what wants to be regulated, and whether it's something that's permissible depending on the product and depending on the legality of the product.
And could you tell us how one, if you know how many of these facilities there are, and do you really get complaints from other facilities, or they seem to be run well?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Tilborg, I will tell you the number of complaints we get about cannabis production facilities is pretty nominal, and it would be somewhat consistent with a particular location that's on discussion for this evening.
Okay, thank you. I just have to wonder, I know in Hamilton they addressed a major odor smell, but I don't know if it was created by a medical marijuana facility, and I don't know if that's going to trip us up. Hopefully not. And if that is, and that is the role of the federal government, they need to get some legislation on top, because this is incredible what's happening in the Ward 4 area there. You drive through, it stays in your car, it gets on your clothes, and all you've done is stopped at a stop sign. I couldn't imagine living there. It's getting into your homes without your windows open. It's just something that should not be allowed to happen. And the fact that Councillor Carpenter has shown that they have been in violation and really are just allowed to continue, definitely these screws need to be turned tighter on them. I'm looking forward to the move to the next quarter, but I'm hoping that we don't run into any jurisdictional issues in dealing with this smell, because if so, we would have to go through a federal government of some sort. And I mean, I would be losing my patience if I was closer living to that area as those people are. I very much appreciate the good work of Councillor Carpenter and Councillor Aktosky and my ward mate Councillor Wall. We are fielding calls on this. It kind of that smell doesn't just stay in that one ward. It does drift over across Elgin Street. It's quite significant. Companies that are responsible have air makeup units and smog hogs and all sorts of filter equipment that in the enterprises that I've been inside, you don't smell anything. Like that's quite incredible considering what cannabis puts out for a smell. It doesn't appear like there's very much, if any, odor controls in this facility. And the fact that there should be a minimum and an enforced minimum, and that it should have no effect on the community, you would expect that to be a no-brainer. I do know other industries are held to a higher regard. I believe Ferrero Rocher has to follow those, because sometimes, no matter how much we like chocolate, it doesn't always smell the best, and sometimes they have a failure. But you know, the thing is, they're a responsible, respectful company, and they deal with the issues. And I'm sure there's been correspondence with this company, and I don't know if they're all that respectful, and I find that shameful considering what they claim to be, what their claim is in the business of medical marijuana, and yet there's no regard for the people around who they're actually, I would say, harming. I would call that harming their quality of life.
Councilor Van Tilburg, you've gone over your time. Would you like
Very
to be
good, sir. No, I'm good.
Thank you. Mayor Davis, you're next.
Yeah, I think that description, stink to high heaven, was made for this. It's a very noxious odor. And it's not just to the nose of some people. Almost everybody who experiences knows that this stinks. And in fact, you know, there is a growing body of evidence that perhaps it could be actually more than just noxious, more than just objectionable. In fact, there have been class action lawsuits in the United States. This is a problem that's all across North America. And, you know, it's really bewildering to me that how this ever arose. And I was quite happy to sign the letter that, along with the CEO, we thought it would get some action, and it's very alarming to me that it did not get action out of the federal authorities. And I really hope in the next federal election it becomes a local issue, and whoever runs for MP, member of the federal parliament, will make this a big part of their campaign platform, because that's where the problem is. This is like, I call it's like legalized bootlegging. It began before the legalization of cannabis. It was way back when they were government was first allowing someone to produce medical cannabis, and it was very limited licenses. I think it was like 75 plants. You could have one person could hold 3 licenses, which never made any sense to me. Very little regulatory oversight, and it's a complete mystery to me when the federal government came in to clean up the commercial production of large quantities of cannabis. Lots of rules, lots of regulations to control the odors, and they did nothing about these licenses. At the very least, they should have been phasing them out, or saying on a smaller scale, you have to comply with the same kind of regulatory oversight and requirements of the larger operators that have to comply with them. So the whole thing is so bewildering. It's like a federal government that just isn't paying attention to the problem and doesn't seem to, I know there's all kinds of outcry all across the country, all across Ontario, and it really is it's just mystifying to me. So, you know, as James said, Masquerade, where does it end up? It's all these kinds of problems. It ends up with us. I'll be very interested in seeing what the staff report says. It's a challenge for municipalities to do it, which is why a lot of the pressure is on the federal government. But like I said, I hope it becomes a big issue in the next federal election, locally and provincially and nationally. And I'm hoping FCM can also get involved in it. It's come up periodically at LUMCO. It's really hard to deal with on a provincial basis because it clearly is federal legislation. I'm not saying it's an excuse, but that's the most effective way to deal with this. Maybe we can do something to help with this problem and help control it in our municipality. We'll see, and I wait anxiously for the report as well. But talk about a frustrating problem, because you know there's solutions to it, and you know where those solutions can easily be found if there is a will. And I just don't understand why it just seems to be neglected at that level of government. Hopefully that'll change.
Thank you, Mayor Davis. Councilor McCurry, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I find it somewhat ironic that the Trudeau government can't seem to manufacture an ounce of homegrown vaccine, but they've presided over the proliferation of dope and medical marijuana, seemingly without regulation that would permit an operation like this to operate in the middle of a residential neighborhood in Brantford, Ontario. And yet, you know, the thing that surprises me is that the company remains anonymous, and that's the only thing about the resolution that I think could be improved upon. And I wonder if staff might, I suspect it's probably not the case tonight, but I wonder if the staff might be able to provide council with a copy of the corporate search and a list of shareholders and directors of this outfit, and as well a copy of any licenses that they may hold, and a legal opinion as to whether or not that information, if obtained publicly, is publicly able to be disseminated by us, so that the people in the community can understand exactly who's responsible for this. And perhaps out of that may come a campaign by the community, as we've seen, you know, with respect to other issues in the Fourth Ward. Perhaps there's a group that might take this on to advocate for the health and safety of those people that live in this neighborhood. Because it can't always be about us, and it can't always be about other levels of government. You know, there are some cases where people can take direct action on their own. You know, I think we're pretty aware that folks could picket those sidewalks at that location. And although I wouldn't encourage that, I'm certain that that's their right with respect to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms is to have their say on the city sidewalks surrounding that property. And perhaps, you know, if the community does care to get involved and does care to create a grassroots organization, that perhaps they'll get some media attention. And, you know, this may get the attention of the minister. And the other thing, I guess, is that we didn't name the minister responsible in the resolution either. And that might be a welcome addition if staff could provide us with that kind of information when we get to council, so that everybody can be aware of just who's doing these things to the residents of the 4th Ward in particular, and I guess South Brantford in general. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Before I go to second time speakers, I have a few comments. I think it's interesting that if I understand the rules correctly, if I want to grow pot for my own use, I'm limited to 4 plants. But if I go to a doctor and get a prescription, I can then go to this location on Brock Street and say, grow me 20 plants. So I'm not sure why I'd be allowed 20 plants in one location, but only 4 in my own home. When cannabis was legalized and we started authorizing operations to grow commercially, they had many hoops they had to jump through. They had very strict rules they had to follow and licensing. There are very strict controls on odors emanating from those facilities. And yet, if you're growing it for medical purposes, none of those rules seem to apply. And our own municipal bylaws that say you can't grow marijuana commercially in a residential zone or near a residential zone, for some reason doesn't apply to these medical facilities. So I think it's absolutely ludicrous that there's 2 different standards. Anybody growing marijuana for medical purposes should have to follow the exact same regulations that the commercial operations have to follow. And I think that's the message that we need to, as the mayor says, make an issue in the next federal election. And I'll certainly be asking anybody running for the federal election these questions, and hopefully everyone else will as well. But it is certainly something that has to have something done, and hopefully staff can come up with something that will work and is workable. And with that in mind, we'll go to second time speakers. Councillor Vanderstel, you first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've just sent 2 proposed amendments in support of Councillor Carpenter's resolution to staff. If he would like to speak first, perhaps staff will have enough time to do the transfer. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carpenter,
yeah. I want to start and just sort of read a few things about the previous owner of the tire facility is the current owner, still the owner of the building. Since 2014, when they were a tire facility, they had 11 violations of property standards bylaws, resulting in issues of 4 property standards orders, 8 violations of lot maintenance and waste bylaw, resulting in issuance of 4 bylaw orders, 4 violations of city zoning bylaw regarding excessive outside tire storage, 5 violations of the city's noise control bylaw, 1 unsafe building order to comply with under the Ontario Building Code, numerous violations of the Ontario Fire Code, numerous violations of regulations and enforcement by the Province Ministry, and numerous regulations, environment and climate change violations, several violations of the city's traffic bylaws and sewer bylaw use. And the owner considered these fines and these restrictions as the cost of doing business. And believe me, they're going to consider the cost of doing business as part of this process. I think it was asked by Councillor Martin, how can I grow 4 plants at home? 4 plants at home are for recreational use. You can't grow 20 plants for recreational use anywhere else. You would never have a license. This is when people get licenses to grow marijuana for medical purposes, and it will become an issue in other parts of the city. They are allowed to, if the doctor gives them a medical license that says that they need 200 plants, then they can farm that operation out to somebody else for a fee, and they can grow for 4 individuals, which is what's happening here at this Brock location. Whether those 4 individuals are actually getting the marijuana, the federal government doesn't follow up to ensure that they do. In fact, we found out that this place was growing in far excess of 3,500 plants when only 800 plants were allowed to be grown there. And then our police, rightfully so, confiscated. Very frustrating for them, I'm sure. Phil McCollum, who is our MP, who's responsible to speak to the federal government, I have had no response. We haven't had a response. What the response he got when he spoke to the federal minister, or if he spoke to the federal minister. I don't think that's happened, or at least I don't know what's happened. I didn't get a response back. And I don't think the mayor or the CEO has either, by the way, the letter. I'm quite sure they haven't. Now, I know one of the candidates running for that vacant spot coming forward, who's a friend of mine, understands this quite clearly because he also is the chair of the Police Services Board. So he knows this frustrating problem. So what I would like to say to staff, though, Hamilton has put a nuisance bylaw in place that's been working. So I want our legal to look at it as well, to look at what's going on in Hamilton. They have a $50,000 fine for such organizations if they emit noxious odors into the community. And if they have second-time offense, it's $250,000. So keep in mind, they're making a lot of money off growing this marijuana. As I don't believe it's going to all the people with the medical licenses at all. I think this is just another game for organized crime to grow and make the business. So we need to make sure the fine is substantial, and we need to, if we can just take the Hamilton bylaw and check to see if it's working, how well it's working. And because we'll be in the courts for certain how well it's working. And if it's working there, just bring it here next month if you can. If they've already got one written, let's not reinvent the wheel on this one to get started. Bring the one that Hamilton's got, bring it here, and let's put it in place in June if you can. I mean, the timelines that we put in here for second quarter, that doesn't mean you have to wait to the second quarter. If you find a solution next week, bring it to us. We've been working on this since 2019 to try and get a solution. And the other thing I want to add is council members will know that during our official plan that we're going to pass at the end of this month, we've upzoned a lot of those industrial properties that are in residential neighborhoods. That will make that property more valuable as a residential site, unless they can keep growing medical marijuana. I don't think anything is more profitable than what they're doing there right now or ever will be. So we've done that. The flaw, it's not, we can't think of everything, but we as a council, when we were waiting for the 1-year moratorium before we decided whether we're going to have commercial marijuana stores, we didn't take the bull by the horns at that time and put the zoning in for where marijuana could be grown and where marijuana operations could happen. And then we had to delay that in order to decide on a distance between neighborhoods, how far we're going to do it. So that allowed this operation to go into place. As soon as they heard that discussion, they went into place, and then we're stuck with this neighborhood. So I appreciate everything that, and any amendments that anybody wants to add, I'll take any amendments possible. I just want to get this resolved as soon as possible. I would hate to see a neighborhood lose another summer to their neighborhood to be able to be outside with their children and family. And Cheryl and I have put another stop sign in that area to make the neighborhood safe. It's being reborn again as a residential neighborhood, and we'd like that to continue. I mean, that's all part of the process. So I appreciate any help any member of the council could give me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Van Tilburg, are you ready with your amendment? Or sorry, Vanderstel.
They get us confused all the time, Chair Martin. I think it's the hair.
It's the V.
It's our height.
Thank you, Chair Martin. Okay, so I know I'm fully aware of the fact that the County of Brant also suffered from a rendering plant smell issue, noxious odors and whatnot. I would like them to be, that would be 0.5 or point, I don't know where it is. Oh, a clause D be amended to include the County of Brant in circulation, so that they're aware that we're suffering from similar type of things, albeit not the same business or emission, but that, we got their bag, and we understand that we suffer the same way they do, and we, would like them to be aware of that. And for that, staff prepare the necessary bylaws to develop a system of measurement and develop placement of measurement instrumentation, including surrounding affected locations, as volunteered by local area residents and businesses. Speaking further to it, Mr. Chair, yes, the mayor's right. It stinks. We know it gets into your clothes, gets into your car, and you can't get rid of it for block after block after block. But people really don't know how bad it is. They can say, yeah, well, I've smelled pot before, but They have no idea how powerful this smell is and how invasive this smell is. So for the people who are complaining, who are living next door, who can't barbecue on their back decks, this is just an attempt to speed up the process with Councillor Carpenter's blessing. If we have the instrumentation that would gather the data that tells us how many parts per million this noxious smell is, and we start gathering that sooner than later, we'll actually have the data to compare, and we'll be able to give a stronger case as to what level is too high. And we'll have a case study that states where we can go in the future in support of this resolution as it comes forward in many of its permutations. This isn't the first time it's going to come up. It's going to come up again. I just want to be able to measure it so that we know how bad it is and then take action. So if you're over a certain amount of part per million on whatever the smell is, you have to take corrective action. If it isn't based on the data, we really shouldn't be taking action at all. If that is part and parcel of what Hamilton has developed as a system of measurement in order to take action against people who are offending people, left, right, and center, that's great. If not, we can add it in and hopefully give this bylaw a bit more teeth. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Carpenter and Antosky, for bringing this forward.
Councillor Carpenter, if you could confirm you're accepting that as friendly?
Yes.
Thank you.
It's in the bylaw, it's in the right resolution, but that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's okay with Councillor Antosky as well? Wonderful. Seeing no further speakers on this, Councillor McCurry.
Thank you, Chair. I've written an amendment as well that I've passed on to the clerk to incorporate the suggestions that I made in my speaking opportunity. I wonder if the clerk has seen it yet. I went to Tanya.
Through the chair, Tanya Daniels was here for an item. She's not clerking this evening.
Sorry.
If you could forward it to me, please. Thank you.
It'll take me a minute, Mr. Chair. Can you come back to me?
Well, I could if I had other speakers, but there's nobody else in the queue. Can you just read it out and send it to the clerk after you read it?
Absolutely. It would add a further clause that would state, and the staff furnish council with the following information. 1, corporate search of the building owner and the manufacturer, including information about shareholders and directors. 2, copies of applicable licenses, and if known, those contractually connected to the building owner and manufacturer. And 3, the government ministries responsible.
Is that friendly, Councillor Carpenter?
Absolutely.
I see Councillor Antosky with the thumbs up, so that's accepted as friendly.
And the clerk should have, Julia should have that in her mailbox now.
Wonderful.
Thank you, I do.
Seeing no further hands up, we'll call the question.
Mayor Davis, I am just waiting on your vote. The motion with the friendly amendments is approved unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Mayor Davis, Councillors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCurry, and Utley.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to items for consideration and consent. Councillor McCurry, I believe you have the motion to move item 7.1.1.
Thank you, Chair. I have, and Councillor Vanderstelt is the seconder. And this is item 7.0, items for consideration consent, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Vanderstelt, that all items for consideration and consent, 7.1.1 and 7.2, separated for discussion purposes, be approved.
Thank you. And the only one separated was 7.1.1, and I believe that was Councillor Vanderstelt.
This time, Mr. Chair, you got it right. This is for, I don't know, Gary or Joe or Jeff, I'm not sure. The holding provision, if they're, oh, Gary's still here. The holding provision applied to this property, what was the nature of that holding provision?
Through the chair, to you, Councillor, I might bring that forward to the planner. I don't know if Jeff is still on the line. I believe Joe is, to look at that for the nature of the H.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the nature of the holding for 242 Mount Pleasant was that the applicant entered into a site plan agreement with the city and posted the necessary securities.
Okay, does this also include a block plan application? Because there's another proposed site, or at least a lot for a proposed site directly across the road here? Or is it out of time, or will it be out of time by next July?
So if I'm understanding, through Mr. Chair, if I understand that question correctly, that, like, this proposal, like, there's some history with it, like it dates back a couple of years. It predates the block planning process under the new proposed draft official plan.
So it doesn't apply?
Correct.
Okay, understood. Okay. Now, this isn't any effort whatsoever to circumvent the normal system of public consultation on this, right? This is just removing a holding provision.
That's correct. I mean, it went through probably a couple public meetings. I've been involved with this file for a few years. There was a zoning amendment from, I think, 2015, and then the owner acquired some additional lands next door, and then another zoning application, another condo application. So there's been a few public meetings with this development site
but
already.
This is still early days in the process, and now they're asking for an extension into mid-year next year to make sure that they got all their T's crossed and their I's dotted, and that would follow another series of consultation with the neighborhood, correct?
There wouldn't be any more, what I'm going to say, public meetings that are statutory to a planning act process, unless they do come in for like a zoning amendment or a minor variance application. They do have a site plan application. They're very close to final approval on that. Normally, though, condo applications or condo developments themselves, the registration of condos don't occur until the site's really built out. And I suspect that's probably going to be the case here. And that's probably one of the reasons why they've asked for the extension on the condo. And then the lifting of the holding is a requirement for us to issue final site plan approval. So that's one of the other reasons why that application is before council or committee tonight.
Okay, there are some issues that have arisen. So the point at which we can bring those forward would be not necessarily now, but during site plan approval, final approval, right?
Correct. So I mean, if Councillor, if you do have any maybe questions or concerns from any of the adjacent landowners or neighbors, by all means, you can send them through to us and we can take a look at them. And we still have an active site plan application, so I think there's still an opportunity to deal with. If there are any issues, we can still deal with them.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much for the clarification.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome. Seeing no further inquiries on this item, we'll call the question.
Item 7.1.1 is carried unanimously on a recorded vote. Those in favor, Councilors Vanderstelt, Sless, Martin, Antosky, Wall, Van Tilburg, Carpenter, McCreary, Utley, and Mayor Davis.
And that brings us to notice of motion, since resolutions were dealt with because of delegations earlier. Councilor Vanderstelt, Councilor Vanderstelt, you have the first one, 9.1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. John Over Home Funding Model and Oversight. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor McCreary, 9.2.
Chair, thank you. It's this is concerning user fees and non-resident review task force.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And with that, that brings us to the end of the agenda. And so we are now adjourned. Thank you.